Hey guys, real quick before we start the video, I want to direct you to the community tab on my channel. I am currently running an event for you, the viewers, to rate every single Monster Hunter monster from 1 to 5 stars. This project is going to be a bit of a run back from the 20th anniversary popularity poll and is meant to allow everyone to voice their opinion on every monster, so we can get a big picture look at how the whole community feels about the entire Monster Hunter bestiary. There will be a new poll on the community tab every single day at noon Eastern Standard Time, and all polls will remain live on the channel, so you can answer any of them at any time. You will not miss out if you miss the poll for the day. I will be updating numbers all the way from now until the end of October when the last polls have been run, and in October or November, we're going to have a massive video event where your comments will be read, all the numbers will be crunched, and the monsters will be reordered based on how you all voted. Every vote on every poll matters, and anyone has a chance to have their comment read in the video itself. And if you want to help me get more data and reach the broader Monster Hunter community, I'd appreciate a like on this video and, maybe hit the subscribe button to help this channel grow. It'll put me and this project in front of more eyes. Okay, no more YouTuber CTA shilling. Here's the video you actually clicked on. Thank you. Hi, how you doing? So, it's me. I'm back, and this time we're talking the monsters of the third generation of Monster Hunter. So, third generation. Kind of similar to second, right? Where you've got a couple of stuff in like fourth and fifth that have some higher heights, but some lower lows, because some mechanics kind of get a little over complex when they're really trying to shoot for some really complicated stuff. Doesn't pan out. But second and third is just all around like very, very solid. Pretty much across the board. I mean, third generation was a really good time for Monster Hunter, where I feel like just like the games in general understood the formula incredibly well. This is right before like the end game started to get nuts. This is kind of this is like the end of like the classic era of Monster Hunter, before we got the big super long end games and lots of complex play styles and stuff. This is where classical Monster Hunter really kind of hit its stride. And that goes for the monster design too. Really kind of hit its stride. Not the craziest stuff that we're gonna see. Some of the best stuff comes later, but damn, do some of the really good hits come out of third gen, especially as they get expanded on going forward. So, and you can kind of tell what I'm thinking about third gen monsters by looking at the tiers. A little bit of a reference to Zinogre. We got perfection given form up at the top. That's something borderline not a single issue. If there are issues, they're either so small or I just couldn't care. The fight's fun, the gear's sick, the music's tough, all around excellent. I still love the thing, but there might be one singular glaring issue, or maybe there's some gap in the moveset that's kind of obvious that there really should be something there. On the verge of greatness, similar, but kind of like a step down. Like, you got something that's really cool here conceptually, or you got a moveset that's pretty damn sick, but there's either some kind of like glaring mechanical absence, or the moveset is maybe just kind of like a tad bland, and you really just need a little bit of work on this. Somewhat subpar. Fight's either not all that different from a base monster, or it's not that fun. Mechanics aren't that great to deal with, but it's like it's inoffensive. And then at the bottom is shocked if anything's this low. There might be like one or two things that might find their way on here, but like, I don't know, that's kind of it. I feel like that tier's basically kind of just gonna be a formality, really. Who knows? I'm sure someone will think that something's absolute garbage tier. Let's get rolling into it, eh? So, I name the top tier perfection given form, and we got great Jaggi. How do you not put him in perfection given form? I mean, the memes about the dude are great. Being the canonically strongest monster because he couldn't get the frenzy virus in 4 Ultimate. It's like one of the few monsters that couldn't get infected. Yeah, no, the memes around the big guy are great. And he's been absent for far too long. I think he's generally pretty damn well liked. Jaggi's a cool looking dude. I think kind of just in general, the improvement he brought to the Raptor Bird Wyverns was a great overhaul. I don't think you're going to get many people who would disagree that the Dog Wyverns are the best of the Raptor Bird Wyverns. I think that's pretty general consensus, because the old world Raptors are so skinny. Because, the old school Bird Wyverns, they're so skinny, and they're so hoppy, and they're so samey. And then, like, Ziti and Kuliaku are, like, some of the worst 5th generation monsters. But the Dog Wyverns, so your Jaggi, your Wroggi, your Baggi, your Macau, your Azuchi, your Apipos, they're kind of big, they're kind of chunky. The movesets are somewhat samey, but a little bit more diverse. Their packs are more interesting, their designs are more interesting, they're a bit more imposing, they're a lot cooler looking. They're way less annoying to hit because their hurt boxes are so much less tiny and they're hopping all over the place a lot less. It's just a general improvement across the board with these guys. And Jaggi's the trendsetter there. He's also just kind of a cool dude in his own right, you know? Like, the design's pretty good. The neat-looking raptor dinosaur. Very kind of traditional Jurassic Park looking. Very Hollywood dinosaur. You got the big frill on the head. You got the, like, the purple, red, and orange color scheme, which looks really good on him. You have the sexual dimorphism in the pack with the Jaggi and the Jaggia. Moveset's pretty similar, but it's perfectly fine. You got your double tail whip. You got your bite attacks and everything. Pretty simple stuff, but nothing bad. Definitely, again, better than the moveset of, say, Velocidrome. The coolest thing about Jaggi is the pack tactics that he has, which comes packed with a really good sound design that he has. So he's got a whole collection of sounds that I really like and that are just really memorable. Honestly, they stick in my head super well. And he uses the different howls and the different, like, guttural roars and whatnot to summon more pack members and to whip them up into a frenzy. I've said this a couple of times on streams and in videos. I think Great Jaggi is the superior pack monster to Great Izuchi, because Izuchi tries to, like, get his boys in a formation and they sync up attacks and whatnot, but you can kill his little Izuchis really, really easy. And it's a gimmick that's just kind of half-boiled. Great Jaggi is just like, I'm gonna summon 6, 7, 8 of my kids, and I'm gonna have them just throw a temper tantrum and attack you at these random intervals and in totally broken patterns and whatnot. And I have very fond memories from Jaggi back in Tri where they just surround you and hop around you and scream at you and come flying at you from different directions. It's nice and chaotic and it's really fun. Super simple, but it's a memorable little encounter. Sound design's really good. Design's really good. The armor's decent looking. It's not the best armor there. The Jaggi mask is iconic, though. Definitely needs more moves if we're being objective about things, right? He definitely needs more moves if he's to come back. It's pretty easy to kind of just beat the crap out of him. As much as I love the guy, it's kind of easy to beat the crap out of him. He's also the first boss I ever took down, because Tri was my first game, as I've said numerous times. So, you know, I got some nostalgia for the guy. First big bad boss I ever was able to slay. Slayed it with a hammer, by the way. I remember quite distinctly. He's cool. I like him a lot. But the move pool's not anything special. But there's so much other good stuff about him. I don't know. I feel like if I put him in all around excellent, that's mostly because of the meme. But like I wanna, right? Because the sound design is cool. And the pack tactics are kind of cool. And his music's fun. And like where he is and like the big Jaggi den that's right in the middle of the deserted island is cool. And I really want him to come back. But he's got like 4 attacks. But they're decent to deal with. You know, the double tail whip is fine. The big hip check is cool, and he's got like a fun little sound effect that plays before he does it. I feel like objectively he's on the verge of greatness, but I want to put him in all around excellent because I love him. I love him so much. He's so cool. It's either gonna like top this one up. I feel like it's a little dishonest if he's right. I feel like he's gonna be high up there. A little dishonest if I put him up much higher than that. We'll see. I always reserve the right to go back around and switch things at the end. Alright, Great Baggi. The sleep-using, tundra-dwelling, tougher cousin. A Great Jaggi. Here's an interesting one. The physical moveset is almost identical. You might have a change or two in Rise, but not that much. I don't think he really has like a single new change in Rise. You barely. Still got the hip checks, he's still got the sleep. The lamest thing about him is that his pack is barely a factor, and I think that's kind of to balance out the fact that, you know, a lot of sleep going out could be kind of annoying, but doesn't really hunt with the pack all that much. It's really just kind of a mono fight. His health bar is kind of chunky. It's a good design. I like the blue, I like the black and the tan. The crest is really cool. He's got a very similar soundscape to Great Jaggi, but pitched down, which is neat, but I don't think it sounds as good. Also, he doesn't have like all of the same hoots and howls that Jaggi has. Couldn't mark him as a bad monster, but I think he's very much kind of Iodrome-ish, where it's very kind of reskinned, some interesting redesign, some good colors, cool looking crest, but the moveset is very, very similar with just a projectile spit. It's definitely, you know, a better monster than Iodrome for sure. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like he's due for a little more. A couple of new sleep spit attacks. I think he's the biggest of the three of those raptors, so you could have him be a little bit more of a bruiser, have the other ones be a little bit swifter. I just think, like, of the three third-generation raptors, he's probably the least interesting, but he's still cool. He's still cool. I think he's pretty hard carried by the design, though. And sleep's not a bad mechanic. You know, I think his weapons have some pretty good utility because they're pretty much the only sleep weapons in Tri. Usually not a ton of sleep monsters, so his gear can usually find itself with some pretty good usability. I like Great Baggi, but he does get a little lost in the fold, you know? I think he's probably gonna, like, top out this tier, but might maybe, like, somewhat subpar. Again, could reserve the risk to bring him up here. Great Wroggi, though. He's a funky one. I like him a lot. He's probably one of the wildest and most out there designs for a raptor. Very amphibian and frog-like. We're talking about Great Baggi being very much like Iodrome, where it's very much, you know, same raptor moveset with a projectile spit. This one, we're comparing, like, Poison Raptor to Poison Raptor with Iodrome versus Great Wroggi. The differentiation in design, the design itself, the utilization of poison. He's got a dynamic part break where he can really diminish his poison gas spit up attack by breaking his throat sac. Again, not the biggest pack integration, kind of like Baggi, but a little bit better. Again, the sound design's not as good as Jaggi because it's very similar, but pitched down with less. The design is great. The colors are excellent. I love kind of like the stumpy toes and fingers and like the flat little bits on his tail and whatnot. The throat sac. He's this cool looking little goober of a monster with the poison spit up gas being nothing too annoying to deal with, but it's definitely more effective than the usual kind of spit up glob attacks that the raptors tend to have. Definitely one of the more deadly of those bosses. The moveset's got a couple of its own differences compared to some of the other raptors. I like where you fight them in these nice, like, humid, temperate, flooded forests and, like, swamplands and whatnot. Yeah, he's like a tree frog raptor. He's cool. And then his gear is sick. Like, all of his weapons look surprisingly really cool. Especially, like, the dual pistol, dual blades are super sick. The cowboy armor is, like, really clean looking. Like, it's really clean looking. It looks tough, dude. Yeah, Great Wroggi's awesome, man. I mean, for what he is, he's really cool. I think he's definitely... I don't think he's my favorite. I think Great Jaggi, just because of, like, the sound design and the fact that he was my first, is probably my favorite. But I think, like, of the raptors, I think Wroggi's the best. Alright, Qurupeco. Dude, where the hell has this dude been? For all the third generation monsters that have rightfully been given a lot of love in, like, 5th and 4th, where the has Qurupeco been? What are you doing with this guy? Why is this dude locked up in the basement? This is one of the coolest things you've ever made. Are you kidding me? Qurupeco is amazing. He's awesome. Everything about him is awesome. The flint clicking on his wings to make the fire bursts, that's pretty sick. The defense down, globule spit so he can jack up his damage a little bit. Very unorthodox for a low-level monster, but makes him a little spooky if you haven't been upping your armor a little bit. The song buffs that he can give himself and you. Really cool stuff. The summoning monsters is iconic. The design is great and super different from so many other bird wyverns. Again, with the sound design is amazing. The color palette with the orange and the green and the yellow and the little bit of purple. It's a lot, but it looks so good and it works so well because he's a bird. The big opening trumpety nose thing that he's got and the big bulging, gross-looking throat sack, and his goofy personality. I love the high personality, wacky birds, and he clicks his Flintstones together, clacking around while he's doing a little dance for, like, his songs and whatnot. He's so fun, man. He's not difficult, but he's so fun. He's so fun. And the move pool's not the biggest thing in the world, but it's pretty good. You have like the Flintstone clacking and the songs and the summoning. I think he's got just like a general tail whip type of thing. It's kind of weird that he doesn't have a roar that needs earplugs. I know Crimson gets that, but I feel like the regular probably should because he's supposed to be extremely loud. And he's got like your general bird wyvern pecking attack. Could probably use a couple of new moves here and there, but what he's got super unique and a lot of fun. Yeah, I mean, what's to say, dude? He's so good. He's so good. I love Qurupeco. Even without the iconic nature of the summoning. He's a really good bird wyvern completely by himself. But oh my god, dude, the summoning. The summoning is so fun. And it's fun in like the cutscenes. And it's fun in the gameplay. So you take like this normal fight and you don't shut him down with getting a flinch or popping off a sonic bomb. Then you have a Jaggi shows up. Or a Rathian shows up. Or a pack of Ludroth shows up. And then, dude, the surprise at Deviljho and OG try. Oh, it's so good. Because the roar kind of sounded like Rathian. But it kind of didn't. It just like in the amount of time it took for you to like kind of get over the confusion. Because the roar was different. This 2-story tall dinosaur just showed up out of the woodwork and was murdering you and murdering the bird that you were just fighting. It was so good, dude. Oh, yeah, I love him. I love him. He's one of the best things they've ever made, and he's in like 3 games. We haven't seen him in over a decade. What the f are you doing? He's so good. I think it's because, like, they have so many of these goofy, mid-level, high-energy, high-personality bird wyverns, but f it. Put 4 of them in the same game. You want to have Pookie and Kutku and Acnisom and Qurupeco and Hypnocatrix all in the same game. Do it. And because they kind of get pigeonholed into similar niches, a lot of them get kind of shifted around and backed around and, like, take way too long on the sidelines. Put a whole bunch of birds in the same game. What does it hurt? Fluff up the bottom rosters a little bit, for the love of God, please. And in 5th generation, I mean, he'd be in 6th generation now if he makes his way into Wilds. Be a lot of fun, because you see, like, these big monsters barreling across the maps and showing up and whatnot. You're like, ooh, okay, we see what's on the map. We got to be able to shut that down. And, dude, in, like, Wilds, the way Wilds is looked, that's even scarier, because, you know, you have regular Qurupeco. He's completely by himself. It's like, whatever. He does the roar for Doshaguma, and then he brings the herds of the big boss monsters into the fight, and, like, all of a sudden, the fight goes from 1 to 7 bosses in the same area. Like, you gotta shut that down, or it gets scary quick. It'd be so fun in Wilds. You kidding me? Put this dude back in. I love Qurupeco, man. Get him up there. Get him up there. Couple new moves, sure. I don't think he's gonna top perfection given form, but get him up there, dog. Oh my god. I love him. I love him. Now, Crimson Qurupeco's an interesting one, because he does some stuff that's really cool, and makes a couple of changes that are, it's okay. The color palette's interesting. Again, very bird, very colorful, very myriad of stuff. The reds and the oranges and like the yellows and the bit of blues and whatnot. He's definitely cool looking. Definitely cool looking. He's the one who has the high grade roar, or the roar that you need earplugs for. I feel like that's something that Qurupeco should just kind of have across the board. But, you know, cool that they gave it to a subspecies. The layout of maps that he can go to is slightly different. Like, he can make it to the flooded forest instead of the sandy plains. And then he just has like a whole bunch of other really fun shenanigans that he can do. So he has like the sleep roar he can do, so he can put you and the other boss monsters to sleep. I think if he's exhausted, he can actually put himself to sleep by accident. I think he has a roar where he can automatically send the other boss monsters into rage mode, which is nuts. That's terrifying. That's super cool. He can summon more than one boss at the same time, and the roster of other boss monsters he can summon is far expanded, so it goes up to like stuff like Savage Deviljho, Stygian Zinogre, Duramboros, Green Narga. They just took Qurupeco and they like gave him a lot of stuff, dude. The lamest thing about him, I think, is the lightning. It's not the worst, but I think like the fire flintstones just makes way more sense. You know, he has like, what, like electromagnetic flints on his thing now. I know they did it to kind of just like change the element around, and like it's inoffensive, but I think it's like the lamest thing about him. And then like his icon in P3rd and 3 Ultimate has like a blue throat sac, but 1, it's not visible on his body when uninflated, and 2, it's still red, I'm pretty sure. So, like, I feel like they should change that to blue. I don't know why the icon is a different color than it actually is. That's kind of weird. And then, like, the colors are good. I don't think they're quite as good as the normal Queru. And then, of course, he has lightning, Flintstone, clacking, do thunder damage, but it can also flash. And unlike a lot of the other flash monsters, breaking the part doesn't diminish it. It just, I think it increases the amount of times he needs to clack his Flintstones together to actually get the flash off, which is something, but not as interesting of a dynamic part break. There's some stuff that's really cool about him, and I think make for like a really good, more powerful Qurupeco, and then there's a couple of changes that are just, they're still fine, but they're kind of just like side grades to like mild downgrades, and they're just tiniest bit lame. Lightning's still cool, but like the fire Flintstones is cooler for him. He does a lot of stuff. He's properly dangerous. And I bet, like, on the other hand, like, that could get a little annoying with, like, the 3 bosses in the same map. Again, like, if you were to bring this into Wilds, how do you expand on that? So you bring, like, 1 pack in, and then, say there's, like, Wraths on the map, and you bring, and then there's, like, I don't know, there's, like, 9 bosses on the map at the same time. That's absolute pandemonium. But, Crimson's good. He's a good expansion on Qurupeco. And he's definitely more dangerous, but at the same time, I think the regular Quru's maybe just like a little bit tighter. Again, it's like the element swap, I think, is the one thing I don't love about him. Again, it's fine. You want to do perfection given form? Because again, I think a lot of the upgrades on his singing abilities are really good. The auto rage mode, the sleep, the more summoning, the roar that needs earplugs. You know, they bring in, like, the lightning, so, like, the flash makes sense. There is a dynamic part break, even if it isn't as dynamic as other flash monsters. So, yeah, no, he's good. I don't think there's enough that I dislike about him to drop him a tier. I think he's still really good. I think he's a very well-done expansion on Qurupeco. Definitely not as good, and there might grow to be a gap between the two eventually. Arzuros. Arzuros is a charming fella. He's an inoffensive fella. He's a better punching bag than other punching bags, but let's not kid ourselves. He's a little bit of a punching bag. Craziest thing that he does is the big haymaker sweep and claw combo. That's kind of fun. He's got a really cool pin where he'll grab you and he'll shake you around and he'll steal honey out of your inventory. They'll plop down and he'll eat it. He's fun. He's a lot of fun. I like Arzuros. He's super simple. He's mad simple. He's so easy. You can just kind of kick him around. Zinogre kicks him around. But I like him. He's funny. His design's good too, you know, for a monster it's a bear. He looks good. You know, good colors, like the mixes of like blues and greens and tans all kind of blended in pretty well. Like the color blending on him is very good. He's very much a bear, but he's got like his big, stocky, huge forelimbs, like the spiky gauntlets on his arms. He's got like the plating on his back. You know, if this was like an actual animal, he'd be terrifying. He'd probably be able to kill every bear that lives in the real world. But in Monster Hunter Land, he's kind of a big, doofy pushover. He's funny. He catches fish and he shakes you down for honey. He's got like his quadruped moves and he's got his biped moves like a bear. He's fun. I like him. I like Arzuros. And the armor is, I've never adored how his armor looks, but some of his weapons look kind of good. I like him. He's a cool dude. I'm gonna put him like right around with Great Jaggi. I like him. He's a fun guy. Lagombi. Okay, Lagombi is probably my least favorite of the 3 portable third bears. It's not a bad monster. It's a little annoying. The slipping and the sliding and the repositioning very constantly is a big part of his shtick. I get it. But it is very heavily relied on in his moveset. The snowball throwing is a lot of fun. I do like the snowball throwing. Could maybe do like a new snowball move or 2 or something. Because he's kind of got like, he's got like the big one, and then he's got like the triple throw and whatnot, and then he's got the belly slides. And he's got like a couple of other attacks, but that's like the bulk of what he does is like the slipping and the sliding and the snowballing. And it's fun. He's a goofy guy. I like him. He's a big penguin bunny bear. Is my favorite moveset in the world to deal with? No. Is it armor I'm ever gonna wear? No. So weapons that the weapons again are okay. Great Far North, kind of like Eskimo, tribal-y type of something. They're fine. The design's super simple. He's got like the big penguin stomach and the really powerful hind limbs and the big bunny ears, but still like kind of like the bear structure. Design's good. It's definitely my least favorite again of the bears. And he's not bad by any means. Just like, I don't know, mildly annoying to somewhat fun to deal with. I think in Rise specifically, he's kind of fun because you have the counterattacks and he goes sliding into you. You can just bash off of those. You know, in some of the older games when you don't really have those kinds of options and you're not really waiting for him to slide into you so much, him slipping and slide like all over the place is a little obnoxious. He's a little obnoxious, but not like painfully obnoxious. He's fine. He's good. He's going to go a step above Baggi in somewhat subpar, but only like somewhat. I still quite like him. honestly. And, you know, in this tier list, you gotta remember that I'm ranking 3rd generation against 3rd generation. If we were doing, like, all the Monster Hunter monsters, he'd definitely be higher than this. Higher than, like, the 2nd tier from the bottom. He's not bad. He's not great either. He's not something I'd ever go out of my way to farm. He's not something I'd really fight for fun. He's mildly obnoxious at worst and pretty good at best. He's never really kind of like blown me away. He's not bad. It's a cool personality. Volvidon, I feel like is almost kind of a hot take, because I see that a lot of people don't like Volvidon. I kind of do. Again, it's a little annoying with a lot of like the repositioning and everything. For some reason, I like it better on Volvidon than I like on Lagombi, and I'm not entirely sure why. But they're two very high maneuverability, very, very fast, slipping and sliding around monsters. I just kind of like Volvidon a little more, and I think it's probably because Volvidon's got a little bit more moves in the pool, so things are kind of spread out a little bit better, because then he's also got the paralytic tongue, the big tongue lashing, and the paralysis projectile. He's also got the stench coming out of the back, which is a neat little tool. I personally think the stench debuff is kind of fun because it is somewhat threatening. Yeah, no, he's just got like a nice little grab bag of tricks. You know, he's a cool insectivore. He gets a lot of his abilities from the bugs that he eats and the ingestion and digestion and a reuse of different toxins that he possesses. The curling up into a ball and rolling around is really fun. Generally, I think the design is really good. He's very different from the other bears, but you know, he's this big like battle armor anteater type of thing. That's kind of cool. I think he generally like looks really cool. He's fierce looking. He's kind of dangerous. Definitely the scariest looking of his 3 brothers. And no, his grab bag of moves is again, it's not like the best in the world to deal with, but I find it just less obnoxious than Lagombi, I think, and more engaging than Arzuros. And I don't know, I feel like he has stench and he has paralysis, but I just don't find him that annoying. I find both of those attacks perfectly dealable with. I don't really find myself getting like totally stun locked or status spammed by Volvidon all that much. And then yeah, no, he rolls around a lot, but he rolls around a lot less than Lagombi does because he has more moves. He just has more stuff. And it's a lot of stuff that could be somewhat obnoxious by themselves, but it's so much different stuff spread out so well that, and neither of them, and then none of them by themselves are like super offensive, so you just have a move pool that's not that bad to deal with. I don't know, I kind of like him. I like Volvidon. I've never found him that annoying. I think it's, yeah, no, I think it's the spread. I think somehow, for myself personally, because again, I know a lot of people are kind of mildly annoyed by Volvidon, is like, the tongue lashing's a little annoying, but he doesn't do it that much. The paralysis is a little annoying, but it's not that hard to avoid and he doesn't do it that much. And the stench is, yeah, again, I don't find stench that annoying. I think it's kind of a cool debuff, honestly, but again, he does that somewhat often, but not too much. And he rolls around and repositions a whole lot, but it's very easy to kind of track what he does, and he has a lot of physical attacks. So it's like weird, like, right? He has a whole bunch of stuff, but it's like, it's spread out so well that the moveset I find kind of fun to engage with. At least for me. I feel like a lot of people listening to this like, what the f are you talking about? He just has a bunch of annoying. And like, I feel like this is kind of like what I marked down Gypsaros for, is he has like a whole big grab bag of stuff that's mildly annoying, and it's just like, that lacks like really kind of any cohesion. I feel like Volvidon has slightly better cohesion, because if he paralyzes you, then he can punish you with slamming into you with the rolled up ball form. And he combos his attacks together pretty well, because he'll like go into the roll and then follow up the roll into either a stench discharge, or he'll go right into like a paralysis spit. He has a lot of like really good follow-ups where his abilities will transition from one into the other that like a Gypsaros doesn't have, so I'm more inclined to learn Volvidon's moveset because he has a pretty good ability to punish you and some pretty good follow-ups. So I like learning Volvidon a little bit more because I know that he's a little bit better at hitting you with his grab bag of annoying stuff. So I'm like, okay, so I know that I kind of have to get around that. That's going to be a little bit more punishing. And then I want to get in and I want to go for my hits. So honestly, I kind of like the fight. I feel like he kind of manages to do what Gypsaros fails to do, is have a couple of stuff that's a grab bag of tricks and gimmicks that are a little annoying, but they have a cohesiveness to them that makes them a little bit more fun as a sum total package than they would be individually. So Volvidon, I think, is gonna go. I think I still like Wroggi more. I think he's gonna go there. That was an odd spiel about Volvidon, but I hope that made sense. I think the moves kind of gel together in a way that I find is fun. So Barioth, then. Barioth's a fun one, because Barioth's always been a good monster. And then you specifically have the Iceborne version of Barioth, where he's just a demon. And then he kind of like settles back in Rise to kind of like that mid-level state. But man, dude, that Iceborne fight is... It's crazy, man. Barioth's got a lot of cool things to him. The design's great. You know, white, frosty, saber-toothed tiger dragon. That's sick. Very simple color palette with almost like the pure white, good like Arctic camouflage with just the very pronounced orange tusks. Very good, very effective design using that pseudo-wyvern, big predatory cat dragon that Tigrex and Nargacuga brought in before him. That's pretty great. Takes that and brings it to like a saber-toothed tiger as opposed to like a panther and a regular tiger. Out of the three, he's the most aerial. He has a lot of moves that I really like where he gets up into the air and he goes flying and spinning around. He's got like these big like off-the-top rope WWE pile driver moves, and if you have him in the right area, he's leaping off of walls. He just like combos his flight into his dives really well. He doesn't stay in the air too long, but he actually has a lot of stuff that helps him stick out from Nargacuga and Tigrex because of the elemental prowess, because of the flying and those combos. So you think, you know, you have like your third big cat pseudo wyvern dragon kind of get a little repetitive, but no, he's got like two of his own niches. I feel like they could even do a little bit more with the flying, honestly, if they really wanted to. He's got his big pounce attacks, and he's got his ice debuff tail attacks. He's got like his big sweeping spinning moves where he uses like a lot of his own momentum to carry himself around into these big spins. He's very momentum heavy, I've noticed, with a lot of his moves, and it makes his animations pretty impressive to just watch. But it also gives him a lot of very big full body attacks that can be admittedly a little annoying to deal with. And then like his ice tornadoes are fun, but they took away like the snowman effect, which is a bit of a bummer. Now it just knocks you up into the air, so it's not quite as fun to deal with. And Barioth's good. And then, and then you have the dynamic part breaks. So you have him, he's super mobile, and he's flying all around, he's slamming into things, and it's really hard to get him. But if you can manage to break his forelegs, then he has a tough time getting his grip on the ice, and he's flopping around a little bit, and he has a lot more downtime, and the fight's a lot more manageable. It's some of the more impressive dynamic part breaks out there, because it makes a lot of sense, because you're removing those really important claws that he has, that he needs for ice traction. It carries over to stuff like arena fights and whatnot, but they're not going to change his program specifically for that. That doesn't ruin anything. But it's a very cool and very effective part break. And then his armor traditionally has always looked really good. His weapons are all really cool. The very cool weapons, you know, not the highest ice, but they typically have like pretty good sharpness and pretty good affinity on them. There's some decent weapons to run sometimes. They always look really good. Like his switch axe is iconic. His greatsword looks great. His sword and shield looks amazing. His dual blades are pretty good. His longsword looks really good. Got a lot of really cool looking weapons. So it's all usually gear that I very much enjoy making out of him. So that gives me a lot of incentive to fight him, and I like fighting him. Is he perfection given form? The only thing, and I mentioned it, is a knock against him, is that a couple of his moves are very big. Now, granted, his telegraphs are also very big, so you can see his stuff coming. And, you have any inclination of what he's going to do, you'll be able to read his stuff. But, yeah, a lot of his attacks are really, really big and a little hard to deal with sometimes. I guess that's probably the most annoying thing. And then, like the Iceborne, unless you break the wings, he does not stop moving, and he hops around a lot, so it can be a little frustrating, but it's still pretty good. The other thing is like his, especially in Iceborne, like you need those wing breaks, but the hit zones on his wings aren't great unless you tenderize them. And then, he's still good in his previous incarnations, and he's still like good in Rise and Sunbreak, but he's just nothing compared to the Iceborne one. The Iceborne one kind of carries certain things. The move pool's really good. It's a lot of really fun moves, the dives and the ice tornado and the massive pounce and the bite attack and the tail swing that goes up into the flying and the wall dives and everything. Like, Barioth is cool. He's really cool. I like Barioth a lot. He does a really good job standing out from his brothers. And I'm glad that he's been around for a long time. That's kind of the thing, is he's been in so many games recently that I'm kind of expecting that he's not going to be in Wild. That makes me a little sad because I like Barioth so much. But he's been in Gen Alt, he's been in Iceborne, he's been in Rise, he's been in Sunbreak. I'll still take him in Wilds, please. But, I'm glad he's had a lot of representation, because he's a good monster wherever he goes. Is he in perfection given form? I think I'm going to put him right there. So I think Qurupeco's just like so... He's going to be kind of tough to top for a little bit, I think. Barioth's good. Barioth's super good. Mildly annoying sometimes, but the moveset is also very learnable. If you got Evade Window on you, very rollable. It's a fun moveset to learn, honestly. If you really kind of get into it and you really learn the tells and everything, it's a particularly satisfying moveset to roll through and to evade and whatnot once you learn it, but it can feel very oppressive, especially in Iceborne. Sand Barioth is an interesting one. He's okay. Sand Barioth has one, like, really cool gimmick. So they move him out into the desert rather than the tundra, and they do that because you still have Barioth's breath attack that is able to create these swirling wind cyclones, but now that you're out in the desert, it kicks up dust devils instead of these snow tornadoes. And Sand Barioth is able to do a couple of different variations on that. So, you know, the dust devils in and of themselves, they can do damage if they hit you, but that's not really his goal. So number one, he can make, like, the tiny little baby ones, and they go zipping around the map, but he doesn't make too many of them, and they're usually pretty small, so they're not that annoying. You're also fighting him in a big, wide open desert, so they can be minor environment hazards, but they're really not the most obnoxious things in the world to deal with. So that's fine. But then you have, like, the big one that he makes. And again, that can damage you. That one's usually stationary, and that's the one he can go leaping up into it. He uses the momentum of the cyclone, goes whirling around it, gets spat back out, and comes diving at you. And that's such a cool attack, dude. That's a really fun attack. I like that attack a ton. And the cool thing about it is when he makes that tornado, he's not programmed in such a way where he's automatically gonna go for it. I was watching a fight back recently. He'll leave that tornado out there, and it's just kind of like this looming threat. He might leap into it at any time. He might not. I think I saw like once or twice it dissipated without him even doing the attack. But it's not like tornado automatically goes in, spins around, comes at you. So it's a little tougher to read, and you really kind of like sitting in anticipation for that move. Because he can pull it out pretty much any time that tornado's out on the ground. Other than that, the moveset is almost identical. And I feel like some other new physical attacks would be needed if you were to ever bring Sand Barioth back. I think you would be very fitting for the Windward or I think it's Windswept Plains in Wild because of, you know, the big sandstorms and everything. So him kicking up big tornadoes of loose sand everywhere could be really fun. I think he'd look pretty cool. So I want to show you this real quick. As for like the design, there's a cool color palette in here. The one we have so far, this particular, is not it. I think this is a victim of having a little too much vibrancy and saturation on a couple of monsters. I think he definitely needs better color blending. So let me show you, like, I've seen some artistic depictions of him. But, like, so with some slightly toned down in the red and with some better color blending, you got a Sand Barioth that looks more like this. That is a really cool looking creature. That's a little silly. That's a little silly. I think the red needs to be way less harsh, needs to blend in. I think, I know, like, part of the ecology is that Sand Barioth is supposed to, you know, be an animal where he's red in the face because it's just a whole bunch of smeared blood. I think it's mostly because having the yellow face would look kind of silly. So he has the red fur. It's supposed to, yeah. I also, you know, like, looking at the artwork, you see, like, the definition of, like, the stripes on his arms. That's, again, not really there. So you got a Sand Barioth that looks like this bad boy. That's a cool-looking animal. I think you can make Sand Barioth look really good with just some proper color blending. And then, yeah, no, you have a decent baseline with the core gimmick, but that's the bulk of what he has. He would definitely need more new moves. But Sand Barioth, I think, has high potential. Pretty high potential. But as is in Tri-Ultimate, you know, the only game where he's around, yet to be fully fulfilled. The design needs improvement, and the fight needs more. But I think we have some good groundwork with Sand Barioth. And as I said, Barioth is just a cool-ass monster already. So you're working with a pretty damn good template. I think we're gonna put Sand Barioth at the top of On the Verge of Greatness. Because he is still Barioth, so you still have a really good move. Even like back in 3rd generation, Barioth was still really good. You have a cool gimmick with a cool move. And the other Dust Devil thing. So there is some substance there, But yeah, no, design needs work. Expand on that mechanic a little bit. Give him a couple of physical attacks of his own. I think you're golden. And then I really appreciate subspecies in general that you bring them to a new environment and you really kind of figure out how the gimmicks of that monster are going to translate to that new environment. You know, using the Cyclone Breath and turning it from ice tornadoes into dust devils is a really good readaptation of Barioth. So I like saying Barioth quite a bit, but there definitely needs to be more. Gigginox. Gigginox is the 3rd generation stand-in for Khezu. And Gigginox, I find, is the superior of Khezu in most every way. But unfortunately, the Japanese love Khezu. So Nox hasn't been back in a very long time. But Nox is cool, man. I think Nox looks better. I think his fight is more interesting. He actually has music. I think his gear looks way better. Nox is like Nox is one of the spookiest monsters out there because he's this eyeless. He's got is it like a false? No, I think it is like an actual mouth coming out of his butt because it has like the teeth and everything. So he's got like the eyes and the mouth coming out of his back end. So you have a tough time figuring out like which end is which end. So one end spews out like the poison gas and poison globules. The other one creates the eggs and whatnot. I think sound comes out of both ends. He's just this absolute freaky looking weirdo mixed with a bit of like kind of like frog-like DNA in there, kinda, with like the very kind of rubbery smooth skin and some of the sound effects of him walking around and like the webbed feet and whatnot. He's very amphibian-y, very frog-like. The colors are kind of neat with the red underbelly and like the kind of like dark cerulean top and the purple accents. Part of what made him interesting was like the dark caves and try that you needed torches to fight him in. So all you had was like the bioluminescent purple. If you didn't light up the caves, you just had like this weird leech thing crawling around in the caves. He is the most unique of the pseudo wyverns because he's the only one who's not a big cat. He's this frog leech looking thing. His moveset is pretty good. It's not exemplary, but you have the Gigi spawning is cool, and you have the poison gas discharge attack and the poison globule spit, and he leaps up on walls and then comes flopping off. He's got like the extended neck with the double sweeping bite attacks. He's got the poison bomb. The fact that he like gestates his young and like deploys these eggs that spawn a whole bunch of Gigi to join in on the fight is horrifying. He does have some really big poison attacks, but they're not the worst things in the world to deal with, especially if you got like a shield or something. And the body slam into the big poison AoE is really easy to read too. It's just like the vibes are really cool with this one. The moveset is pretty good. The gear is good. He's got like that like dark vampire kind of aesthetic going with them. Design's really good. The theme music of the Tundra is cool. Fighting him in the dark caves is a lot of fun. Yeah, no, he's really good. Not too much to complain, except, you know, the moveset is fine. It's not the best. I wish they'd bring him back, man. You can have Khezu and Gigginox in the same game. It would be perfectly fine. I know they're not going to rule out Khezu because they like Khezu over there a lot. But, like, come, this guy's good. You made another really good monster. Give him a turf war. Have both of them crawling around in the spooky, creepy caves. Give him a turf war over the spooky, creepy caves. Yeah, no. Gigginox is great. Then you got Baleful Gigginox. And, you know, if regular Gigginox is kind of like an homage to Khezu with the creepiness and the crawling around in the caves and everything, Baleful is just Khezu. Like, Baleful is just Khezu. Like, what? I feel like this is just like a straight up homage. He even has like the AoE shock field that Khezu kind of has, but now it's lightning. He's got the triple shot projectile of lightning that Khezu has. He has paralysis like Khezu has. And the obnoxious thing is that he has more paralysis than Khezu does. Like, he's more of a paralysis monster. He's almost strictly a paralysis monster. I know that he has a dynamic part break where you can reduce some of the paralysis on some of the attacks by breaking his head, I believe. The color palette it's fine. I think it's inferior. The cerulean bioluminescence I don't think is as good as the purple. And then like kind of like the kind of mustard yellow green gray is pretty good, but I think like the dark cerulean's a little cooler looking and the red underbelly's a little cooler looking than the purple. So Baleful doesn't look bad, but I don't think it looks quite as good as the regular Nox. I don't know, he's kind of just like a straight up Khezu ripoff. I feel like Baleful is almost like a joke. It's like, yeah, no, we made a monster that's like very reminiscent of Khezu. This is him, but now it's just Khezu. But like kind of more annoying because there's more paralysis to him and a little bit more AoE to him. It's not quite as pace-breaking as Kezu. I don't know. Baleful Gigginox is just not stellar. He's not great. There's worse. He's not great. I mean, like, Nox and Kezu could exist in the same game. Baleful and Kezu could not. Is he at the bottom tier? Probably not, because it's still Gigginox. So the moveset's still pretty good. And you know, he also loses the egg laying. He can't do the egg laying like Gigginox can. It's he just lays like Thunder Mines. That's one of the coolest things that Nox can do, and you take that away from him? I don't know, man. The design's inferior. He's basically just a ripoff of another monster completely rather than a cool twist on him. The fight's inferior. He loses a really cool gimmick. Is Baleful going bottom tier? Yeah, no, like, unlike Gigginox, which I think should come back, and unlike Kezu, which is like, I think he'd be perfectly fine to come back, because in Rise, his fight is finally, like, adequate. I feel like Baleful just straight up doesn't have a purpose in coming back, because Kezu exists, and he's a bit better now in 5th generation than he was in any of the previous generations. So, like, Baleful, I think, is, like, borderline pointless now, unless they really wanted to change up something. But he's designed to really just be Gigginox, but a Kezu. So, it feels like objectively he's in somewhat subpar. I feel like just Baleful just really just doesn't have a point. I don't know, I feel like that might be a little too mean. Yeah, no, because he's not bad. He's got a dynamic part break. Moveset's fine. His Gigginox moveset is pretty good. It's obnoxious, but it's not like heinous or anything. Admittedly, some of his gear's kind of neat looking. There's some cool looking stuff. I mean, Gigginox stuff usually just kind of looks good in general. Yeah, I feel like bottom tier is a little... I mean, you get it, right? Because, like, why bring him back? But does that mean he's bad as he exists in the game that he exists in? No. I feel like if I put him in the bottom tier, that rests way too much on his return. It values his returnability more than, like, how he actually is. I still don't think he's great. I still think he is the bottom of somewhat subpar. I feel like he really just kind of is a direct rip of a different monster and is not terribly interesting in his own right, actually takes away some interesting things from Gigginox, and then is admittedly definitely the more annoying of the two. So he's low, but I feel like the bottom tier is undeserving. Okay, then, moving right along. Green Nargacuga. This would be one to kinda just write off, right? If anything's going in, like, shocked if anything's this low, Green Narga would be, like, he's on the short list at the very least, but let's think about him. Green Nargacuga is definitely the least interesting version of the monster. I mean, to be fair, you have Lucent and you have Silverwind, and then, you know, Blinking and the normal one and all that stuff. So he's definitely the least cool. His color palette in 3U is not great. He doesn't do too much different. You would be forgiven if you thought that the only thing different about him is that his spike launcher can automatically stun. That was it. That's the only thing Green Nargacuga has. Technically, that's not true. And here's the neat little thing about Green Nargacuga, is a lot of what Narga is nowadays is owed, well, not a lot, but some of what he is known for nowadays, some really important aspects of him actually, is owed to Green Narga. Namely, the multiple side hops that he can do to reposition themselves. The original was only ever used to be able to do one. Green Narga was able to double that up and do two and reposition themselves multiple times before he attacked. The regular one was historically never able to do that. The other big thing is that the double tail slam is an invention of Green Nargacuga. That was something I was unaware of for a while. For a good long period of time, I had misremembered and thought that the double tail slam was just always a Nargacuga thing, dating back to Freedom Unite, but it's a Green Narga thing. And now the double tail slam it's like iconic. It's a very rudimentary part of Nargacuga to fake out and delay the second tail slam to try and bait in hunters to hit him with the second hit. It's a very important part of Narga's kit. So the fact of the matter is that Green Nargacuga is a very important part of the monster's history, but a lot of what he is, almost all of it, has been taken into the traditional Narga now. The only thing that remains unique is the auto-stun spines. And so we're kind of faced with a bit of a Terra Shogun Scimitar situation, where this monster brought something particularly interesting and added a spin to something that the monster was known for, and the idea was so good that the normal one just kind of got it. So what do you do with the subspecies now? And that definitely hurts Green Narga. So Green would need someone to come around and say, I have this brand new idea for this creature. Whether they bump up the agility even more, because let's be honest, 5th gen Narga, especially in Iceborne, is pretty slow compared to how the creature should be. So you want to bump up the agility even more. You want to change up the hop structure. You want to extend a couple of the pounce combos. Some combo extensions, some more maneuverability. Just make him this blindingly lightning fast predator. That's something you could do. You could play up the forest camouflage and make him a little bit more ambushy, have him like leaping up and off of trees and stuff. Well, that's something I want like the general Narga to be able to do, but you know, you want to play that up even more with Green. He is in need of someone to come along with a new idea for him, because as he was a creature who had some cool ideas to expand upon the traditional Nargacuga, and those ideas were so good that they just got brought into the fold. So what do you do with this guy now? And that's gonna hurt him as he is. He's a creature that I think I'd like to see back, but I don't know if I'd shed tears for the loss of. He very much like Sand Barioth is another one that I think he definitely needs just some like better color blending to look good. So I think, you know, you have the traditional one, and it's very bright with some proper color blending and just some slight shade changes, and you know, like a forest that's very dense and has like matchingly very vibrant vegetation. You could have a Green Narga that again looks pretty damn good. I think again there's a good looking monster. I like the red tip of the tail is kind of cool. Yeah, no, there's a good looking animal in there. The one that you have so far really just kind of doesn't blend all that well with the forest that he's in. Just doesn't really match. He's a very bright lime green cat against kind of like a very kind of dark, muddy, brownish green flooded forest, and it did not quite work. It's a bit of a vibrancy issue on his end. I'm gonna bump him up over Baleful just a little bit, because Baleful is definitely more, and you know, he's Nargacuga, so maybe like over Baggi, because like very repetitive base with Baggi, very repetitive base on base with Green Narga. Like Nargacuga is better than Jaggi, so we'll bump him up to a little bit over and somewhat subpar. But yeah, no, he needs someone to come in and have a new idea for him for sure. Brute Tigrex is a super cool variation on the regular Tigrex. The worst thing about Brute Tigrex is that he kind of steps on the toes of normal Tigrex's development. Because improving Tigrex and making him a god tier monster has been a thought experiment I've thought up a couple of times. And there's ideas, but there's been numerous occasions where like, oh wait, you could like go and like do like charge combos out and like end them with a roar. No wait, that's Brute. We have that. So that's the thing, is like Brute has a lot of his own really good ideas. It's been like a little tough to think up some new things for the normal Tigrex to do, but that's because Brute's really good, man. Brute's cool. Volcanic subspecies, even more remote and violent and loud and tricky than the normal Tigrex. The color scheme's great with the ashy black scales with the orange highlights on them. Really intimidating looking creature. And that color scheme blends in incredibly well with the gear of Tigrex. So like the orange and blue always looked good, but the black and orange on Brute Tigrex gear looks amazing. Especially that Master Rank armor. Man, that stuff looks good. That armor is sick, dude. Master Rank Brute Tigrex armor is so cool. So damn cool. The weapons look great and everything. There's a lot of cool stuff about Brute. Yeah, no, and his attacks are they're just fun. And they're not particularly obnoxious to deal with. But he's got like his big stomping, chaotic, thrashing around combos. He's got like his head up in the air. He's smashing his paws against the ground and then lets out these big, huge, deafening roars, and then he does like the drift back, pulls backwards, and then lets out another one, and then he like drifts back and pulls out a third massive roar, and he goes stomping in and slamming around, and he roars again, and he's got like, in Iceborne, he has a Cantor's roar beam now, basically, but like a smaller version of it. He's so well animated, and he's so well designed. His sound design is excellent. His gear looks amazing. He's just this big, brutal, just super cool looking force of nature trudging around in the volcanoes and whatnot. Brute's good, man. Tigrex variations tend to be really good. Really good. That's the other thing, is like Tigrex is really cool, but all his variations are so much cooler than he is. He's such a simple monster. I think that's what makes him so cool. Tigrex is really simple, but he's really good, and that makes for a really good baseline for them to make variations out of him, and Brute's one of them, man, and Brute's tough, dude. Yeah, no, and he has like these big, huge, cacophonous, deafening sound attacks, and they're really not that annoying to deal with. They're just kind of fun. I like Brute a lot. Brute's mad cool. Yo, dude, what a guy. I love Brute in Iceborne. I love kind of everything about him. He fits that version of the theme really well, too, because it's a very angry version of Tigrex's theme in Iceborne. Very kind of tankish, very kind of big freight trainy. Moveset's so fun. He's so well animated. The sound design's great. The armor looks amazing. The weapons are so fun. He looks great in the volcanoes. He's a cool volcanic subspecies. The ecology that, you know, brutes live in these super desolate, isolated areas, so they naturally have to be much, much louder for the sake of communication. That's a cool little bit of lore trivia to him. Brute's just good. Like, he's just overall really good. I'm a big Tigrex guy, as you can tell from the last list, because I put him in S. So, like, this Tigrex is going way up. You can't go wrong with Tigrex variations, except for Flame Tigrex from online. That one kind of sucked. It's A&M. This is Brute. Brute's tough. And, like, let's just keep the ball rolling with, like, top-of-the-line, tippity-top tier Flying Wyvern variations. You got Lucent Nargacuga. Holy... Lucent Nargacuga's good. Holy... Lucent Nargacuga's good. That Sunbreak one especially. I mean, he was always good, and he was always tough. Like, he's rough in Tri-Ultimate. He's still strong in Rise. I mean, you got a whole bunch of, like, player options now that you don't have in Tri-Ultimate, so, like, the blow-for-blow difficulty per game is down a little bit, but, like, the amount of stuff that Lucent can do is so sick. The color scheme with, like, the white kind of mixing into the dark blue fur is so good. Oh, dude, when he goes invisible and you got the eye line trails, that's so good. The invisibility is great. It's really good on him because he doesn't have, like, the reflected light motion kind of thing on him. He's just invisible, and you see, like, the line trails and everything, and like the dust clouds of him moving and kicking up a little bit when he moves around, and the sound that you can follow, but, like, it's full invisibility. And, like, the poison spikes they're lethal, and they should feel lethal for something that powerful. He steals an attack from Blinking Nargacuga from Frontier, dude, and it's really cool in Sunbreak. His hazard form's even more dangerous, dude. Like, the lines of poison spike drops, oh, dude, and all of, like, the really big, super heavy hitting invisibility attacks, they're kind of easy to deal with once you learn the timings after a little bit, but, like, the first time you run against him and he goes invisible and you just see him, like, moving all over the place, and, like, when's the attack coming, and he just, like, builds that anticipation and builds that anticipation and builds that anticipation, like, when is it gonna do, just to do the attack, man. And he finally does it, and it's these big massive flips and tail slams and everything. He's like, oh, it's so fun. He's so fun, dude. He looks great, and he's got, like, a great kind of, like, regal, tougher than you vibe. Like, he knows how strong he is, and he is the monster of the Forlorn Arena. I have kind of a bit of a problem with some of the monsters that are, like, locked to the Forlorn Arena and don't go anywhere else. I'd love to see Lucent Nargacuga in, like, a really kind of dense, misty jungle setting somewhere. I'd love to fight him in somewhere more natural, but he is very fitting where he fights. He's brutal, but it's like that good, fun brutal. The moves are fun to deal with. They're very learnable, but they are tough. The invisibility gimmick's great. The poison, it's easy to get poisoned, but, you know, I feel like it should be, because he's really strong. He's really powerful. And he's just got so many cool attacks. The grab bag of moves that he's got in Sunbreak is so cool. And then he like you said, in 3 Ultimate, he's good too. He's great there. Again, arguably a little bit harder because of the nature of the game, but he's good, man. He's always been good. Lucent's always been good. What a great decision it was to have him be the first title update monster in Sunbreak. In fact, you know, I think he was the best title update decision that they made up until Amatsu and then Primordial. Like, I think he remained the best title update monster, the coolest one, like the biggest pop, the most exciting, all the way through to, like, the end of the game. Royal Ludroth. Another really cool guy. Another really good, just like low to mid-level monster. And you know, I made a whole video on Royal Ludroth. He was the monster that really kind of forced me to get good, because I was getting walled off and try, because I really didn't know how to upgrade my gear. I didn't really know about weapon and armor upgrade, like pursuing new weapons down different upgrade trees and whatnot, and really kind of improving as I went and like stopping to actually grind. I was just going after fight, and then got hard walled at Royal Ludroth, because my gear sucked. So I have a lot of respect for the dude. I have a lot of appreciation for the dude. And they just think like pound for pound, blow for blow for where he is. Royal Ludroth's really good, man. His fight in Sunbreak's really great. I'm glad that he came back. I think Rise in Sunbreak did him some favors. Again, a crazy game for a low to mid-level monster like him, but he himself had some good moves. And he's able to string together a lot of his combos really well. He's got like a nice fast flow between all of his attacks. Looks really great. In looking up his ecology, he's just got a lot of really cool stuff that he can do. And then his role and his function as a pack leader is sick. You know, I did a whole big breakdown of what he is and what he does, but you know, the role that he plays for his pack of Ludroth, the fact that he's the leader of basically a harem of the female Ludroth, the functionality of the Sponge Bane for personal defense, for water storage for elemental offense, for keeping himself hydrated over longer excursions up on land. It's this very multifaceted, very cool tool. Again, very nice soundscape with kind of like almost kind of like the bird-like calls that he can make. It's a mix of lion and bird and like kind of alligatory. He's got like the alligator death roll, but a very kind of lion-like pack mentality and design with the sponge mane. Cool big marine reptile. His underwater moves weren't the craziest thing in the world, but they were fine for what they were. His like water spray charge, which was adapted from a lot of like first generation bird wyverns, is a pretty good use of that kind of general like spray and pray dash attack. It's kind of easy to beat up, but you know, I mean, he's a low level monster. They're gonna be a little easy to beat up. You know what I mean? That big sponge is a very easy target. But yeah, no, his lore is really good. He's super charming. He's on some fun maps. He works very good as an out of water monster, so he's really good to bring back. You know, you want to bring him in wilds with the herd mentality. You could have big turf wars between different Ludroth packs, because the royals fight with each other a lot, and you can have a big swarm of the females with them. He's a really good monster to kind of like pad out a rainforest area or a coastal region. And you know, Ludroth are really cool to see. They're nice to have around. You kind of breeze by them sometimes, but I think they're just like, they're pleasant, charming animals. They're great animals to have around and to see them walking around and whatnot. I think they have a lot of personality to them. So they're animals I really like. And you know, for the placement that they have, it's good move sets. The gear is a lot of fun with like the big spongy poofy coats and whatnot that they have. He has some legitimately good looking weapons too. Probably not going to be super high within this tier, but Royal Ludroth really just doesn't have any problems. For where he is power-wise, I think his moveset is fine, his damage is fine. In Sunbreak, his speed is pretty good. He can catch you with a couple of moves sometimes if you're not being careful. The move pool is pretty good. The lore is great. The gear is not always my favorite on a personal level, but I really appreciate it as something that comes from him. I like seeing they have a really just good presence as animals. Charming individuals with a lot of good strengths for where they are. I have a lot of appreciation for Royal Ludroth. Purple Ludroth's, yeah. The coolest thing about Purple Ludroth is that he has a couple of interesting mix-ups on the physical attack. I don't think they've managed to find themselves onto the Sunbreak Royal Ludroth yet, but I could be wrong about that. Someone could correct me. But he has a couple of really cool, like, diving attack into his barrel roll. He has some cool physical combos that are admittedly well animated and some pretty cool physical mix-ups. And you know what? I kind of appreciate that, because a lot of subspecies in and around this area, they very much rely on their elemental shifts, and to see just some genuinely good new physical attacks in a subspecies is perfectly fine. I appreciate seeing that. The poison is something. You know, he's got like a big poison spray when he splashes down. He's poison globule attacks when he spits, so he just swaps a lot of his water moves to poison moves. That's fine. He doesn't really have the Ludroth harem with him anymore. It's kind of like Gigginox, where the subspecies takes away that really kind of familial pack mentality and that kind of togetherness and cohesiveness as an animal, so that sucks. The design is worse, but not horrible. It's definitely worse, especially, like, the pink and the purple on the mane is kind of neat. The thing I don't like about him the most is probably kind of like the really washed out greens on, like, his head and his back and whatnot. He's got the red claws, though, which are kind of cool. And I just, no real strong feelings. Purple Ludroth is fine. Couple of neat physical attacks. The water to poison is fine. I don't even really know, like, what the reasoning behind that elemental swap is, but, like, I don't know. He's a side grade at best, a downgrade at worst, but only like a mild one. He's still Royal Ludroth, so the moveset's still pretty good. But it's just a bit more annoying in this poison. So maybe like here, because again, decent template. Not going to knock him down too much for it. Definitely less annoying than Baleful. Gobul's a funky looking dude. I like Gobul. He's a charming fella. He's not the craziest thing ever, but he's fun. He's got a lot of stuff to him. The paralytic tail spines, the big poofy pufferfish abilities he's got, the anglerfish lantern. They were able to mix a lot of really spooky fish into one Leviathan. Very different from the shape of a lot of Leviathans. All the other ones are sea serpenty. He's very fishy. You got the dynamic part break with the flash that you can be able to break, so that gives him a 1-up in that department over, say, a Crimson Qurupeco. Looks really good all puffed up. You have, like, I really like him as an ambush predator at, like, the bottom of the ocean, sucking up, like, Epioth and whatnot, and trying to grab you out of it and do a big grab attack out of that. That's really cool. He's cool when he's all puffed up in his ball form underwater. He goes like whirling towards you, like this big mace of spikes. That's kind of fun. You can beat the brakes off of him when he's on the ground. You can just kind of beat the snot out of him. He is not built for ground combat, and in an era where we haven't had underwater in a while, that makes Gobul kind of hard to bring back, because he was very much built to be underwater. You can fight him on ground, but eek. He has his tail sweep, he's got his roll. Sometimes he'll dig and he'll come shooting back up, but he's not built for that. You beat the tar out of him. It's good design too. Good freaky looking fish with the big scary mouth full of sharp teeth and the huge spikes coming out of them, and you got the whiskers and everything, which are built to attract like, Epioth and whatnot to come be lured in to be eaten up. Charming dude. Cool design. Good grab bag of gimmicks. Not too annoying. Dynamic part break. Decent colors. The gear is only... some of the weapons are kind of cool, and they're paralysis weapons, so that's kind of neat. Gobul's good. I'm going to put him at the top of on the verge of greatness. Would need more moves, would need underwater to come back, but there's a lot of good stuff in there. Nibelsnarf, or as we sometimes refer to him as, a la Austin, Narflesnoot. What a guy. Another big, charming, goofy Leviathan fish, but this one's in the sand. He's a good boy. Does a lot of stuff that your Gobul does, but better. And you know what? He is pretty much just a pound-for-pound replacement of Cephadrome. We'll talk about this later, but, you know, you have, like, the hardcore Cephadrome in Frontier, and that's actually good, but we're talking, like, the mainline Cephadrome that 90% of people know. Nibelsnarf is better in every way. He's cool, man. He's got, like, a little bit of Basarios DNA in there, where he'll, disguise himself as a sand dune. I feel like you get into like a more naturalistic game, like a Wilds or something, that could make his camouflage way better, because as is, you can pick him out mad easy. He's the sand dune. You just smack the sand dunes until you hit him. But, you know, he has the digging, he has the swimming around in the sand and the charging at you that way, but it's way less tedious than the Cephadrome. The design's really wacky and weird with like the sand gills and everything, and the big tumor looking thing on the front of his face, and again, like the massive jaws full of teeth. I love you can bait him into eating barrel bombs. He's got the weirdest part break in all of Monster where you can snap his uvula. Pretty cool design. You got like the eyes on top of his head, which makes sense for him. Yeah, he's very much like Gobul. He's an ambush predator fish, but for the sand, and I feel like he's adapted very well. His moveset's not that bad. He's got his big sand beam. It's nothing too crazy. He's got like some tail whips and whatnot. He's mostly about being like half out of the sand and attacking with sand beams and big bite attacks and diving attacks and whatnot. He's a good monster. A lot of charm, a lot of personality, really funny name, surprisingly cool looking armor for such a weirdo monster. I'm really glad that he made his way into Generations. Kind of an odd pick to get into that game, but I'm happy he's in there. With those big sand dunes and whatnot that you got going on in, on like the windward swept, I keep forgetting the name of it, plains. Nibelsnarf would probably be a pretty perfect monster. You see him like snapping up the Balahara out of the sand or whatever and eating them whole, some crap like that. Be a cool monster to put in there. I'm gonna put him right up in there. All around excellent. He's a good boy. All right. Shockrock, the big guy, Lagiacrus, the first flagship of the 3rd generation. I mean, what do you say about the big guy? He is the Zinogre of 6th generation. Everybody is clamoring for the big guy to come back. We know Underwater's not coming back at this point. We do know that. But, you know, it's still not impossible that he comes back around. You could make a pretty good grounded moveset. You got the shallow water mechanic, which is generally pretty good, has made a couple of pretty cool fights. Just put him in the waist-deep water. You got something interesting for him. He's held back a little bit by a little bit of miss potential. Not even miss, but just kind of like unfulfilled. Because underwater combat wasn't the best in 3rd generation. Wasn't horrible, but it wasn't the best because it was so new. Some of the monster kits weren't the greatest. His moveset on the ground isn't amazing, and then his appearance in Generations is just kind of bad. It's just kind of bad. It's just electroshock spammy Kezu, but bigger. The moves barely even make sense. They're just these big charged revolvey AoE things that barely, it's just not, it's nice to see them, it's nice to have them. I'm glad I got a game on my Switch where I can fight one of my favorite monsters, my first flagship. That fight's not great. And you know, he's super cool, but because of some of the limitations of Try, the fight, it definitely could be better. I think a 6th generation incarnation with the shallow water combat with some stuff like that, I think then you got like a really good Lagiacrus. If you ever eventually brought Underwater back in full, I think you could really get him right. So, you know, I gotta be fair, you know, nostalgia aside, personal preferences aside, I mean, he's still going high, but I gotta be fair, right? He's still got work. He's still got work. He's not there. He's definitely has not yet been in his best form. And so I gotta kind of be fair about it. But God, I love him. First flagship, the quest to go get like the Epioth guts out of the water where he shows up and you're just in the middle of the ocean, completely by yourself, wholly isolated, and then he chases you out of the zone and like all the way back to the beach is so cool. That scared the crap out of me as a kid. I wouldn't pick up Try for like 4 days after I did that quest. Or after I timed out on that quest because you wouldn't leave and I was too scared to go back on the water. And it's the best version of that quest they've ever done too, by a mile. The design's perfect. The design's perfect. Like the crocodile aspect and the sea serpent and the cobra hood and the shockers on the back and the horns and the big fin tail, the blue mixed with a tan and like the little bit of like the ambery brownish orange on the horns and whatnot. Perfect color scheme, great sound design. How he looks moving around in the water, how he's animated is really cool. The way that he's able to move with such a force that like the water swirls around him a lot. Discharges look great. He can like deep fry a lot of the other animals in the water around him. He's magnificent. It's like, in terms of combat, he's definitely, objectively in terms of combat, he's definitely like around here. But by like personal preference, am I really gonna put him under Crimson Qurupeco? But the fight is not in perfection given form. But the gear's great, and the sound design's great, and his animations are great, and his presence is immaculate. His introduction quest is really cool. His presence in Try's story is neat, even though he's like falsely assumed to be the target of the Seaquakes. But he's still like a really good rival monster, and like he completely overshadows you the first time. You fight him to a standstill the second time, you beat him the third time. That felt amazing the first time I played Try. The design is perfect. The lightning is so cool. I think he's one of Rathalos' most interesting opponents. His theme is amazing. I know it's the map theme for Deserted Island, but you, it's his theme. Let's not kid ourselves. Come on. So like everything is S but the fight, and the fight is in like all around excellent, so that bumps him up into S. I think he's definitely better than Quero. But, you know, Barioth is going to stay that one level up because his fight has been in really good form. But a 6th gen Laggy in shallow water, or, you know, maybe, you know, underwater comes in the next portable title or the expansion or Monster Hunter 7 or whatever, you can get him up there. For sure. And I think you could have a grounded fight in the shallow water be S tier. I think you totally could. But I think eventually the King of the Seas is going to have to go back into the seas. And then you have the potential Laggy being like up in here. But for now, I think he's definitely kind of lower S tier. Ivory is, again, kind of like Green Narga. He's the least impressive of the Laggies. But he's not bad. The whole gimmick of Ivory Lagiacrus is that he is predominantly grounded. He can still go underwater, he can still fight underwater, which is cool, but he is adapted to fighting on land. And as that for his gimmick, he is okay. What the developers did with him is they mostly just gave him a lot of new grounded lightning moves. So kind of like Brute Tigrex, he has a retreating projectile attack where he'll slither backwards, fire off an electrical shot, slither backwards, fire off an electrical shot. He has full body AoE discharges, kind of like a Kezu does. He can wrap himself up in lightning when he does his slither charge. That's the bulk of what he's got, and it's a grab bag of decent electrical moves. What I think Ivory would benefit from is if on ground he also got a slew of just brand new physical attacks, and they really sold that he is a skilled ground fighter. Because the fights I remember and the fights I watched back yesterday, it's really just more element on ground. And I think if you really wanted to lock in Ivory as a good subspecies, those moves are fine. They're definitely much better than Generations grounded Lagiacrus. The moves he has are fine, but I think what you would want to do is you would want to take that and spread that out with some brand new physical attacks that the traditional Lagiacrus cannot do on the ground. And then you have like a nice move pool of that, you spread them out a little bit, and then Ivory is really good. As he is, I think he just has 3 or 4 new attacks that are good. And an admittedly quite good color scheme. White with blue looks very good. He does look really cool. I think you could even make him look even better, make the white even more pronounced, make the blue even stand out, really kind of sell that contrast, very kind of like a Zero Ryusu from Frontier, but, you know, less crystally, still kind of like regular scales, but like really kind of sell that color contrast, because white and blue is a very nice color scheme. And then, of course, you know, we talked about it in the Explorer video, but you have like the Land Conquest Lagiacrus who could come in and be a land-based Laggy. Yeah, no, Ivory is fine. I feel like I could totally see if a Laggy does come back in like a Wild or something, him just kind of stealing a whole bunch of Ivory Laggy's lightning ground moves and turning that into his own kit and then expanding on that even more. And then, you know, where does that leave Ivory? But unlike Green, that hasn't happened yet, so at this point in time I really can't mark him down for that. Ivory would definitely need some expansion. I think the gimmick is pretty good for what it is. Ivory's cool, but he's definitely not the greatest. I think I'm gonna put him a smidge over Royal Ludroth, but definitely over under Gigginox. And then you got Abyssal Laggy. Abyssal was like the surprise of the century a couple months ago when he placed, what, like 11th or 12th in the popularity poll for Monster Hunter overall. And Abyssal's sick, but Abyssal's another one I think would definitely need a little bit of work. Watching him back objectively the other day and really kind of freshen up on what he does. The biggest things about Abyssal is the color scheme is amazing, with a lot of the blue highlights and the black scales and like the green eyes. He looks phenomenal. He's also gigantic, which is cool. You fight him in the Undersea Ruins where you normally fight Ceadeus, which is a neat arena for him. He still has like the big whole full body shock, which has like black and blue lightning, and that's much larger. And then his electrical lightning shot has a much larger explosion. And then he has the cyclone generation ability where he'll spin around in the water and create these big underwater cyclones. For like a rare species of 3rd generation, that's kind of cool. In terms of like a little bit more of a modern look at him, and even by comparison to some of the mechanical intricacies of a couple of the subspecies in this game, that is the bulk of what Abyssal's got, and it doesn't look bad. It certainly doesn't look bad. I mean, it's full underwater Lagiacrus, so you're only fighting the moveset that is much more strong and much more developed. It's bigger, and it's badder, and it's more imposing, and it's more damage, and it's more health, so that's cool. Better design, fighting him down in the deep depths is a really cool vibe. Again, the design is just pure immaculate. It's the best part about him. That means that his gear looks incredible. Like, some of the colors on his armor are great. And you slap that on the Laggy armored designs, which have always been good. And the weapon designs, too. Some of those weapons look amazing, dude. So I think he does, admittedly, coast a bit on vibes and looks. Because the moveset's not crazy. He's definitely not the best of the rare species, I'll tell you what. He ain't bad, but he's not the best. And rare species, I think, is generally a club of very high caliber. You want to bring in, like, a modern Abyssal. Whew, boy. you could do something crazy with that. Again, you gotta bring underwater back eventually because he is purely underwater. He is the deep, dark sea, like, cryptid Lagiacrus that nobody's ever seen. He's like just this looming, bioluminescent horror down in the deep, dark depths of the ocean. Like, that's what he's supposed to be, and that's cool. The vibe is cool. And the fight's not bad in the slightest. It's just, as a rare species, definitely could be more. It's very third generation underwater Lagiacrus with some bigger lightning, and the Cyclone move, which is not like the most effectual. So I think it's either like bottom perfection given form or top all around excellent. Because it's all the strengths of Laggy's fight with some bigger electricity. I feel like, honestly, Ivory brings more to the table, but Abyssal's just way cooler. But objectively speaking, Ivory brings more changes. I think we definitely need to see the Laggies outside of 3 Ultimate at some point. He's like, the size and the look and the design and the weapons and everything are just so immaculate. But to be honest, there's really just kind of like 3 or 4 changes to the fight. There's not that much. And the biggest, coolest, craziest thing in the Cyclone that he does, it's pretty avoidable. You just kind of got to get out when he just starts to do it. And he's so big and he twists up so tight that it's not even that hard to get away from it. Like, Underwater Laggy's still good in 3 Ultimate. He's not the best because Underwater Combat wasn't the best, but it's still good. It's still definitely good. The size is really cool. The design's really cool. The weapons are really cool. The Cyclones are cool if they do hit you, but it's not the easiest thing to avoid them. The big black lightning bursts are really cool. You do need, like, the high sharpness to be able to kind of get through some of his defenses. So he's pretty great. Does Abyssal go over the regular one? Because it is the pure underwater, so it is the better fight all the time. You still have just, like, kind of like the flagshipy, iconic nature of the original, and that does give brownie points. But Abyssal takes away the weakest part of the fight. Adds a couple of new cool things, even though it's not as much as it could be. There's immaculate design and gear. So does flagship relevance keep the regular Laggy over Abyssal? I'll leave it like that for now. I'm going to come back. I'm not sold. Alright, so Agnaktor. Agnaktor is crazy good. I talked about this a lot with, like, the Grand Lavasioth conspiracy theory and everything. But there's a reason Agnaktor worked so well. Let me break it down for you. The fire armor on Agnaktor was really well thought out, because what happens with this guy is you have the molten armor, and it heats up when he either touches lava on the map or he digs. And then you have about a minute maybe before it cools off and it hardens and almost nothing can get through it, right? And then you have the chest, the beak, the back, every single leg, and the tail. All these breaks that are a part of the armor that you're trying to chip away at. And you're trying to chip away at. And every single time he softens, you're trying to task yourself to create these new weak points by getting the breaks on him. Because he has, what, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like 7, 8 breaks on him. So, and almost all of those breaks are a new weak point that you can create on him. A new bit of armor that you can chip off of him so you can get at his hide. So every time his armor softens, it's a new opportunity to get in there and create a new weak point. But like right at the beginning of the fight, when he cools down and like his whole body is all walled off from damage, it's pretty imposing. But then you start to chip away at him, and you chip away at him, and you open up a leg, and you open up the belly, and you open up the tail, so you can now go for the tail cut. And just like piece by piece, you start to like disassemble him. His fight has such a pacing that you're still gonna get the hardened armor fairly occasionally, but it's never gonna be too long. He's gonna start to dig again, or kind of just like maneuver himself into the lava eventually all the time. Like, it's gonna happen. You're gonna get that going back up again. So the pacing's really good. There's still attention to create those breaks to get those weak points, but you're never gonna go too long without the opportunity to get those hits in. And he has so many breaks that you can get to create all these different opportunities on the body. And then he has his attacks that can soften up his chest and his beak. So then you have a dynamic level to those attacks that create some weak points that you otherwise wouldn't have, because like the limbs and the back don't have attacks like that. So you can wait for him to do his laser beam and certain other attacks, so he'll create those temporary weak points for you to hit a little bit earlier than you would with the other ones. And then, yeah, so it works so well on him. The pacing is great, the thread is great, the satisfaction of picking them apart is great, the amount of parts that you can get because there are that many breaks is also pretty fantastic, so it makes farming up Agnaktor armor pretty satisfying to do. The dynamics that certain ones of his attacks will heat up certain body parts, so you can go at those before you have the opportunity to go at others, and then you'll have more easily accessible weak points earlier on to get the fight going, is a really good mark for that fight. And that's just the lava armor mechanic, and that by itself is put together incredibly well. And then you have the moveset, and it is the best that like the Leviathans have to offer on the ground. The big curl up tail sweep and the slithering charge, the peck attack with his beak, the laser beam sweep, the tail whips and whatnot, the hip check. It's a really nice grab bag of physical and elemental attacks that have good tells, they have good diversity, they're spread out really well, and then you add the digging attack. So he digs under the ground, he has like the shark fin cutting through the molten rock, so that's really cool. You have the corkscrew digs through the walls and up into the ceiling of like the lava caverns and everything. That's really cool. He'll half pop up out of the ground and do like the big spinning 360 lava beams. The grab bag of moves that Agnaktor has is stellar. So he has all these different moves and all these different forms, and he's moving and you're breaking armor pieces off, and he's corkscrew digging and he's firing off laser beams, and then you break off another part, and then the lava armor ignites back again and then cools off again and you break off another part. It just goes and it goes, and it's just such this dynamic, fun, flowing, very progressible fight that you can mark your progress of very easily. The attacks are satisfying, they're cool, the sound design is great. He has the little Uraktors to really kind of establish him as an animal a little bit more. Wow, Agnaktor's good. He's so well constructed. I still think Lucent's still like crazy, but I'm gonna put him over Brute. I have a very high opinion of Agnaktor. Then you have Glacial Agnaktor. And Glacial Agnaktor has a lot of little things about him. A lot of interesting inversions on the core Agnaktor. So first of all, he inverts a lot of this stuff kind of on a fundamental level, and that's kind of cool. So he goes from a pure fire monster to water and ice. There's like some ice kick up in some of his physical attacks, and I believe his beam attack is water. Okay, you have an elemental swap. Elemental swap's kind of cool right off the bat. You know, ice to fire, that makes sense. It's neat. Then you have the fact that his armor gimmick is inverted. So when he digs, it solidifies the ice on his body, and his ice is very difficult to penetrate. But if you give it a second, the ice armor will start to melt a little bit. So that's an interesting inversion on the gimmick. Honestly, it's probably the more obnoxious version of the two, if I'm being completely honest. I think that's probably the biggest mark against Glacial Agnaktor, is that inverting the mechanic, though sensible, is definitely, I'd say, the less entertaining version of the two ways you could do it. Then you have a cool dynamic there, though, in that, one, fire weapons can, I believe, melt the ice armor faster, so you want to bring like a fire switch axe or a fire longsword to get at that. And two, he has no armor on the chest, so you are always going to be able to hit that part to, say, get some free damage in there when you're waiting for the armor to melt, or, you know, you're trying to build up your spirit gauge on your longsword so you can mind's eye through the ice armor, or do the same thing with the switch axe and whatnot. So you have that option that you can almost always hit. Being able to melt it faster with the fire weapons, like I said, is a neat dynamic. He's a little bit smaller than the standard Agnaktor, so that's interesting. Another very cool but also quite small mechanic about him is that he digs a lot slower, so you have a lot more opportunity to hit him while he's digging. The reason for that is, you know, the normal Agnaktor is digging into molten softened rock, whereas Glacial Agnaktor is digging into this frozen solid ground, so it takes more effort for him to dig. I think that's probably why his beak is a little bit more elongated, because he needs a bit more power to really kind of get in there. Because of the nature of the tundra, he also has ice caverns that he can corkscrew jump between. He also has the shark fin attack. The only thing about Glacial that's not like the most impressive is moveset changes. Again, you have core Agnaktor, so the moveset is good, but in terms of new things brought to the table in terms of pure moves, Glacial doesn't have a ton. The coolest thing about him, I think, is he can change up the sweeping of his beams a little bit, and he also has, I believe, a doubled up hip check, if I remember correctly. So he's got a couple things, but not too much. But in terms of just a lot of very small mechanical changes that compensate for Agnaktor being in the ice, and a lot of just the detailing work. I think Glacial is a very interesting creation. Definitely not as purely fun as the normal Agnaktor, because I think the pacing isn't quite as good, the armor mechanic isn't quite as cohesively made to be inverted, and the design isn't quite as cool, though it is still very good. But Glacial Agnaktor still, blow for blow, is a very good subspecies. It is mostly in the smaller details, and not so much in the big obvious stuff, and you kind of do need the big obvious stuff sometimes, to be perfectly honest. So that marks him down a smidge, but not by that much. And I think what we're gonna do, Glacial Agnaktor, I think is just gonna go maybe like one below Crimson? Maybe like one above, right there. Again, I reserve the right to go back. Now we got Barioth. Barioth I like a lot. Barioth is a charming guy. Barioth is a classic. Barioth has quite a bit to him in terms of like detailing and background and mechanics and whatnot. Again, we're facing another moveset that is not particularly complex. It's a fun moveset in a very casual sense. He's kind of just like a comfort fight for me. So, you know, you have the tail whip and the headbutt and the charge and like a hip check or so. It's something like I'm in the mood to just kind of fight like a medium casual level monster. Barioth is a good, easy comfort pick. You know, he's just something to kind of just listen to a podcast to, but he's not something to kind of lock in and really kind of dig the teeth into. He's a good, just kind of like comfort fight, because I know him pretty well at this point. He's another one who stuck around for a good long chunk of time, which is interesting. He's been, again, in the third generation games. He's been in Generations. He's been in World and Iceborne and Rise and Sunbreak. It's been nice to have him around. So the moveset's not the craziest thing. It is charming, but it is simple. It is kind of cool to have him bash into anthills and stun himself. That's kind of fun. The charge is fun. The fact that he makes choo-choo train noises is kind of fun when he steams out through the headpiece is cool. But yeah, no. Craziest fight ever? No. A lot of the cool things about Barioth come down to significance and details in a historical sense, and a lot of the kind of intricacies between his weaknesses and part breaks and whatnot, because he's loaded up with a lot of really cool little things. So you have him being weak to fire on his scales, which makes a lot of sense. You know, he's out in the desert and he's looking for a way to kind of keep himself cool. So fire is a big no, he does not like heat. So because of that, he wraps himself up in mud. So he has the mud armor, which is extremely resilient to fire. If you want to knock off the mud armor really easily, you want to go for water weapons. So you use water to get off the mud armor really quickly, and that leaves the hide that is actually really weak to heat. So, you know, you're running Barioth in a group of two, you can plan around that. That's kind of interesting. The mud armor in and of itself is really cool because he can go off and reapply it and protect his broken parts. Or if you're not quick enough to break certain parts off of him, then you need to get the mud armor back off so that you can get those parts, so that you can get those, so you can get the breaks, so you can get those parts. His part breaks are very multifaceted. He's one of very few monsters that has 2 carvable body parts, and then you need different damage types to be able to get those off. You need severing to get off the tail, you need blunt to get off the headpiece. So there's a lot of different weapon combinations that you could kind of bring in. I feel like, you know, as much as he's stuck around a lot, Barioth would be a really cool pick for wild. So you could bring, say, like a water sword and shield and then a fire hammer to really kind of maximize the damage types that you need to really kind of fully combat him. You take your water sword and shield and you knock off his mud armor, and you cut his tail off, and then you swap over to your fire hammer so you can do a damage to his proper body, and you can knock off his headpiece, and you can do that. So like the weapon swapping in wilds would be kind of fun to experiment around with Barioth, even though it's a really kind of mid-level fight. So do you really need to do that much planning for Barioth? No, but it would still be kind of fun to just do it for the sake of doing it. And then in terms of like significance to the history of the games, he's also pretty big, right? So he's the first brute wyvern that was ever introduced, and that's a big thing because brute wyverns are a particularly great category. It is surprising how much they've been able to get out of just big theropod T-Rex dinosaurs, and a lot of the best monsters in Monster Hunter have come out of the brute wyverns, and he is the originator of it. He's really good in his own rights, but you know, he's been surpassed in terms of quality by a lot of his contemporaries, and that's for the better because he's the first one and the weakest one. And I've talked about this before, but I feel like Barioth just in general had a very, very positive effect on desert maps, which historically were some of my least favorite in the second generation. Very big, very flat, not always particularly fun to traverse, super duper open and everything. And then, you know, Barioth comes in try with the sandy plains, and he brings along like the mud hole and everything. And because he's an insectivore, that brings along the giant ant colony pillars and whatnot. So a lot of stuff changes around in the sandy plains, and the desert maps start to get a lot more like diversity in their environments and their ecological niches because you have Barroth, this mire lurking, mud needing, waterhole territorial taken up, insectivore hunting, kind of like not big out in the desert fighting brute wyvern, who really kind of needs that desert environment but needs new things in that desert environment to properly thrive, and that compels the desert maps to be more interesting. So you have like the Wildspire is a really good map. My favorite part of the Wildspire is the marshes. Both versions of the sandy plains are very good maps. You know, they expanded how many watering holes the sandy plains has in Rise because you have monsters like Barroth and like Almadron who compete over that type of area. So he has been just Monster Hunter has benefited a lot just from Barroth's presence, really. The small things he introduced have had these big kind of reverberating effects, and for that, he, as a historical piece of the series, I believe deserves a lot of respect. It bumps him up a lot. But yeah, no, the fight's just not, the fight just needs more. That's definitely the weakest thing about him. Then his gear's cool, like his armor looks really sick. His weapons across the board all look really good, have a cool texture to them, like the brownish, orangish, black color palette's really good. He's got like very big, kind of boxy looking weapons and whatnot that I enjoy. He himself, his color palette is quite good. It's simple, the kind of dark browns and oranges mixed together with a little bit of black. It's very simple, but it works for him rather well. It works as kind of desert muddy mire camouflage for him rather well. His design overall in general, like his silhouette is really cool. So you have like the big crown off the top of him, which is goofy but gives him a lot of distinction over the other theropod brute wyverns. It's got like the unorthodox claw and toe shape. I think that works for like traversal in the water and whatnot. It definitely needs more. You can definitely do some stuff with sound, like my friend Austin suggested with him, of he has like big sound blasts coming out of his breathing holes up at the top of his crest. You could have him kicking up more mud around when he's doing his charge, so like creating like a mud ball, kind of like his kinship attack in stories. You could have stuff like that. You could have more mud being kicked up out of his way as he charges, especially if he charges through like the muck and the swamps a little bit. He got some pretty nice stuff in Sunbreak because they gave him a few more attacks that fling out the mud in a few more directions. So in Sunbreak, he has a little bit more zone control and a little bit more zone denial and lockdown, which makes it easier for him to get his charges off. But then again, his mud armor still isn't the most difficult thing in the world to knock off of him. But it is cool that he starts to really kind of get some more stuff to do with his mud in Sunbreak. I think that was a very needed addition for him. But he's definitely still suffering from a very simple one-track moveset that needs improvements. There's more you could do with him, but I think he is on the right track to improvement. You have an Oasis in Wilds in that desert, so Barroth I think definitely could be fitting. Wouldn't be upset to see him again. I like him quite a bit. He's a good animal. I think he's of a big benefit to wherever he goes for the environments and the diversity of desert maps and whatnot. Wouldn't be shocked if we don't see him because we've seen him a lot very recently, but Barroth is a good monster for sure. I think we're gonna put him over Sand Barioth, but under Gobul. I think Gobul has a more interesting grab bag of mechanics. Then you got the Jade Barroth. Jade Barroth is a bit simple in as far as subspecies go. He was a perfect subspecies for Barroth in 3U. Perfect to be turned into ice. Because back in 3U, the mud worked different, where it was essentially just the snowman blight, but it was mud. It was almost exclusively Barroth, could be on a couple of other monsters. So it made sense to have an ice version of Barroth who could do the snowman defect because it was effectively the same exact buff. Nowadays, the muddied state doesn't really exist anymore, or at least in 5th gen it doesn't, and neither does the ice form, so the relationship between Barroth and Jade Barroth isn't quite as sensible as it used to be, and that's probably why we haven't seen him. As much as he was probably a shoo-in for Iceborne, he would probably need some new stuff because the muddied and the snowman blights haven't existed for a little while, and that was kind of like the big thing of like why Jade Barroth existed. As he is, the color palette, it's definitely pretty cool. You have like kind of like the cerulean, very kind of jade emeraldy kind of green with a little bit of like yellows mixed in on the belly. The bigger crest is a little goofy looking. I don't know if I needed the crest to be bigger. Neatest thing about Jade Barroth minus design overhaul is the charge attacks, and this is something that I feel like the regular Barroth could totally benefit from lifting, is that Jade Barroth can do these pretty tight U-turns with his charge, and because of that, he can be a little deceptive and kind of fake you out with things. So he can seem to like almost purposefully miss you when he does his original charge attack, but that means he's gonna like wrap around and anticipate the direction you're gonna dodge in and come smacking into you on the side with the second half of the charge attack. I think that's a really good reinvention of that move. That's something I think the normal Barioth would just generally benefit from. If that got, I'm surprised it hasn't been lifted yet, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. He looks good. He's got that cool charge attack. Lost his place a little bit due to how the statuses and debuffs have changed a bit in how Monster Hunter works. But I mean, they could just, I mean, he's still good, and Barioth is still good. It's just it's just some of what made this particular subspecies special just doesn't exist anymore, and that's kind of unfortunate. But within his own game, he is a good subspecies. He makes a lot of sense for what he is. So I'm gonna put him, I think, maybe like right here, I think, though I'm not sold on that. I might come back to it, but he is definitely kind of like middling level on the verge of greatness. All right, big chunky tanky boys. Duramboros. Duramboros is a fun guy. Big design, big moves, big personality. A lot of fun, right? You see this guy come crashing in through the trees, ripping up the ground and kicking up boulders. That big tail, a hammered thing flying around and spinning around. He's a sight and a half, this dude. Another one, just extremely charming, right? He's a big water buffalo, camel, ox-looking thing on a theropod skeleton, big cudgel hammer tail spinning around like a helicopter, and he's bashing over trees. Armor's pretty cool. Big, kind of chunky, beefy, kind of planty looking armor. Doesn't look too bad. It's good stuff. The moveset in and of itself is kind of like upper middling, honestly. It's a lot of charges, a lot of tail stuff, some body checks and like horn thrusts and whatnot. Some very standard like physical brute wyvern-y type of stuff, minus obviously the tail, right? And everyone's gonna remember the big swinging tail helicopter launching himself up into the air. That's obviously what people remember. And undoubtedly, it's a hell of a gimmick to see something that big launching itself and flying around and coming crashing down. Everyone clears out and goes scattering when Duramboros goes flying through the air and whatnot. It's sick visually. The biggest downside of Duramboros is the coolest thing about him is definitely his biggest weakness. If you can get to the point where you're not scared of his tail spinning around, then that means that you can get under his legs and smack him in the legs when he's doing his big helicopter thing. You can smack him in the legs, do a good amount of damage. Good chance if you have decent numbers on you that you can knock him down while he's trying to do his spin. You get a big knockdown pretty much for free, and then you can wail on him some more. So his coolest thing is kind of his biggest drawback, and that hurts Duramboros a little bit. But you know, by how much, honestly, because if you're smart, you can go and smack him. And honestly, I don't think it's a bad design choice that you can go in and smack him and make a weak point out of his big attack, because it is this big, aggressive, imposing, scary moveset. So if you can get under it, you can punish it, you can get a knockdown and get a good amount of damage out of it. Yeah, I think that's sensible, but it does trivialize him a little bit, just a little bit though. And the hammer tail is the bulk of what he's got. Everything else is, you know, some pretty standard physical brute wyvern type of moves. Nothing else is super impressive. We're not in games where there's a ton of, say, environmental damage and busting stuff and breaking things. So, you know, it's the hammer tail is a big part of the move kit. And then there's some other attacks that are like perfectly fun to deal with. And, you know, he gets a lot of street cred because he's big and he's beefy and he's chunky. I think one of the coolest things about Duramboros, honestly, is that he's an herbivore. So even kind of right off the bat, you know, you have your theropod big dinosaurs like your Barioth and your Deviljho and Glavenus and whatnot, and you have, you know, your big T-Rexes, right? And even, you know, Uragaan, even though he eats rocks, is kind of T-Rexy, but here you have this big kind of docile and less agitated herbivore on this theropod skeleton, which is, it's unorthodox. It's a good change for him. I like stuff like this where you take a very well-established trope in these games and you kind of flip it on its head with a monster that really kind of sits outside of the norm, and having kind of a peaceful, giant, unless agitated herbivore in Duramboros being on the same skeleton as a lot of the big, scary, hungry T-Rex monsters really helps him kind of stand out with a lot of his relatives. And I think that's cool about him, and I think that's just, it is healthy for brute wyverns in general. And I don't think he's busting out of all around excellent. I think he's gonna be kind of low. He's carried a lot by personality and like one big cool gimmick, though the one big cool gimmick is a bit of a drawback if you know what to do with it, and then the rest of the moves are perfectly fine, and it's not the craziest gear in the world. I think Duramboros is in big need for a 6th generation version. He needs trees to knock over, he needs rocks to sling around, he needs to bring just destruction wherever he goes. I think he's built to be just this juggernaut, comes crashing out of the trees and ripping things up. I think some big natural environment-y interaction Duramboros would be a lot of fun for him. And give him maybe a couple of ways to cover some of his weaknesses, and you got him. But he does have a couple of failings, and he very hard relies on a gimmick that can be exploited and kind of his vibe, but it is a cool gimmick and it is a cool vibe, so he does get a lot of points, and he's far from bad by any means, but he's quite reliant on stuff that is exploitable, and I think that knocks him down a little bit. Then you got Rust Duramboros, and Rust Duramboros is borderline like a 2nd generation subspecies. Borderline a 1st, if we're being perfectly honest. He really doesn't do that much that's new. I think the most he's got that is new is a couple of his attacks has a small chance of inflicting the Muddy State if you're really close to him, and that's almost it. Props to him for having some slight body changes. His tail is a slightly different shape. The color is definitely inferior. The pink it's okay for sure, but it's not as good as the mossy browns and the greens and the very naturalistic kind of colors on this one. It's not even like the best desert camouflage. He doesn't really look like the desert all that much. Like the pink is cool. Big pink Duramboros is cool. And, you know, speaking of big, I think, like, the coolest thing, the thing that gets Rust Duramboros the most brownie points is there's an event quest where he's just gigantic, and it's very fitting because the Sandy Plains has the big, super open desert maps that works for giant monsters like that. When I was a kid, I made the mistake of thinking that that was just the regular size of Rust Duramboros, that wasn't an event quest, that the animals were just that big. Him spinning around almost takes up the entire desert zones, and those maps are big, dude. That's kind of the biggest claim to fame that he's got. Inferior colors, borderline the same moveset, one really cool event quest, small chance of inflicting Muddied, but that barely does anything. Like, I watched a couple of fights back and it didn't happen to the guys I was watching. So, yeah, man, I mean, he really, one event quest kind of carries that Moss's whole entire legacy. You could bring him back, you could give him something new. I'm not entirely sure what you do with them, but I guess you could, right? Unlike Purple Ludroth, he's not a downgrade in any way. He's really, I mean, he's just like about as like classic-y subspecies as you can get. He really just doesn't do that much. It's very 2nd gen. Duramboros is definitely cooler than Baggi. I think I'm gonna leave I think Green Nargacuga. Nargacuga is a slightly better base, and green added a lot more to the core monster, so I think we're gonna leave him there. Then we got Uragaan. A lot of people are not the biggest fans of Uragaan. It's not the biggest shock why. His sword hit zones are not great. His health pool's pretty big. His move pool is a little obnoxious. There's a lot of quake stuff. There's a lot of fiery explosion traps going around. You bounce off of them a little bit. There's the big get off me gas discharges, and there's the reposition rolling. Honestly, he's kind of a lot like Volvidon. He's kind of a giant Volvidon, but he's much tankier and he's much larger, and for some reason, his attacks don't quite chain together quite as well as a Volvidon. I think kind of the coolest thing about Uragaan's, like, the setup of his abilities is he'll drop the rocks on the ground with, like, his tail whip, and when he goes to roll, he'll ignite his body on fire by rolling over the rocks, which is kind of cool. Like, Big Flame Wheel Uragaan is admittedly a pretty cool sight. He'll come up out of the roll, he'll slam down, bash his chin off the ground, and the rocks will detonate. So he has some pretty good ability chaining together and some decent cohesiveness. We've talked about, like, map designs based around monsters a little bit, and he obviously has it anytime he shows up, except for Generations, because that was a lot of pre-built maps. Generally, you have the Uragaan zone. So you have a half pipe in the Elder's Recess, you have a half pipe in the traditional volcano. Stuff that's needed for Uragaan to roll around and do the big cool gimmick with his roll and attack and whatnot. The design and the armor and the aesthetics are alright. They're not my favorites. Again, kind of like Duramboros, it is quite different for the big dinosaur T-Rex brute wyverns to have this big, steely, juggernaut, huge chin, rock-eating version of themselves. Quite a bit different in terms of personality and everything. It's pretty good in that department. The design is pretty decent, kind of the big brassy bulky armor. The scoots on the back is a cool design aesthetic, kind of like the tire treads off of them. You have like the molten rock where he stores a bunch of those explosive stones under him. That's a neat little thing. The jaw is funny, the face is kind of funky looking. It's an interesting design. It's not the best design, but I think it has a lot of cool bits to it. Works generally pretty well together. Yeah, no, it's the fight kind of drags if you really don't know what to bring against him, because gunner weapons are what melts him. Blade weapons don't, and if you go in with blades, you're going to be fighting him for like 30 minutes. Like, he feels like he just goes on forever, and I feel like that kills a lot of people's fun with him, because to be honest, not a lot of people run gunner weapons, just kind of in general. But it is the best way to melt them. Being able to create a weak point out of the chin if you break it is interesting, but it's not all that much of a dynamic part break. The rock bombs he drops, they're cool little kind of zone denial traps to keep an eye on. And again, in Iceborne, they light them up on fire, which is cool, and they're nice and big. They'd probably be a little bit more threatening if he had attacks that threw him a little further. Just like kind of more to do with them, because they're really just waiting to be blown up for the most part. They just kind of sit around. They're really not... It's easy to make non-threats of them if you just reposition to an area where he didn't throw them. Sometimes you might get yourself to a point where he has like 10 of them on the field. And again, in Iceborne, they're pretty big, but that doesn't... They're still not the most consequential things. They're really, you're looking out for the chin slams. Chin slams themselves are kind of cool. They can catch you eventually. It's just kind of a cool attack in general. Big kind of hammer chin. I think he's called the Hammer Wyvern, you know, for a reason. The rolling really is just, I think the biggest thing is that he has a big health pool. He has bad hit zones to certain weapons, and he has a lot of movement. So it stacks out into a fight that slogs. It's not necessarily that he has particularly bad combat design, because again, his moves flow into one another. You could probably do something a little bit better, maybe a little bit more with the chin slams, maybe a little bit more with the rocks if you really wanted to. But the roll and the chin slam and the rocks, they move into each other pretty well. I think it's really that he's just so tanky, and a lot of people don't know exactly how to fight him particularly well, and that leads to a lot of people not really liking him, because let's be honest, it's not a bad moveset, but it's not the best on planet Earth, and you're very often fighting it for a very long time. And I think that sours people on Uragaan a lot. You know, is that entirely fair? Not exactly. You do have roughly access to some of that information in World of Iceborne. So, you know, if people aren't doing their research, then, you know, that's on them, honestly. But I do understand why he is disliked. It's not the best design, but it's pretty good. It's not the best combat design, but it's all right. It's a lot of area denial and a lot of get off me and a lot of movement. So there is a lot of breaking up, and then you match that with the fact that he's super tanky. I think that's kind of like Volvidon also has some like get off me tools, but it's not as full body as Encapsulating. He has some movement, but it's a little bit more aggressive and a little less pace breaking. He's got a decent health pool, but it's not the biggest. I think Uragaan just kind of stacks a lot of stuff that makes his fight slog, and he's not necessarily poorly designed. You make some proper adjustments with... Maybe you make the moveset a little bit more lively, you make it a little bit faster pace-wise, and then, you know, hit zones will be hit zones. That's kind of your job to learn, especially because that information is provided to you. I think he's kind of bottomed out on the verge of greatness. I think you totally can make something perfectly salvageable out of him. I think there's a lot of stuff there that really isn't all that bad, but there's just a couple of things running in the background that make him feel like a slog. So now you got Steel Uragaan. Does Steel Uragaan take the bottom spot again? I gotta be honest with you, he's a runner-up for damn sure. He's not particularly interesting. He is still out in the volcano, doesn't really have any territorial shifts, no major personality shifts, not a lot of big mechanical shifts, but he swaps over from sleep and a lot of fire to mainly stench and still some fire. The fact that his stench rocks combine with fire to make that kind of double debuff is something fairly interesting. I think the color scheme is superior. I like the blue on him. The red chin is pretty interesting, but that is the majority of it. It really isn't all that interesting. Really not all that interesting. From what I remember watching gameplay, he doesn't seem to roll an excessive amount, kind of keeps it kind of tight. I talked about what you could do to make him more interesting. I think there is some groundwork with Steel Uragaan, but as is, he's not terribly interesting. His territory's not that different. His personality's not that different, still eats rocks. Borderline the same attacks, but just kind of with some status changes around. I think Stench is a bit more interesting than Sleep. I think the combo Fire Stench is fairly unique. It is something that's kind of the bulk of it. You can also mine his rocks, I think, to get like certain auras out of it. That is, again, it's something. But yeah, really no major changes. Not a lot of physical attacks. Doesn't really do that much with the rocks. They're not that much more dangerous. It is almost completely a status swap with a color change. There's like 1 or 2 minor differences. And it's kind of rough. It's definitely going to range around with these guys way down here. I think Baleful being a paralysis spammer is still probably more annoying. He's also... Purple Ludroth is also a little bit more of a downgrade, to be perfectly honest. Does Steel go over Purple? But I like Ludroth more than Uragaan. I think we're going to leave it there for now. But let's get ourselves back up there with Brachydios. Brachydios is tough as hell. He's wicked cool. And this is kind of, we've been talking a lot with the Brute Wyverns of, you know, some of them are, you got your big rock eater, your big herbivore, and then you got like big spooky massive dinosaur guy. This is your kind of really cool midpoint, right? He's the big T-Rex dude. He's a carnivore. He's spooky looking, but he's also kind of dorky. He's also kind of silly because he's got the big pompadour horn and the boxing gloves, and he's licking his own hands, and he's slobbering all over himself, and he's doing these punch walks and whatnot. So he's got like this really cool mix of intimidating and goofy high personality that, you know, a lot of the flagships are going for big cool factor. They want to be really cool monsters. Brachydios is unashamed to be a little dweeby and a little silly and a little goofy, but he blends that with cool really well to give him a personality that a lot of the flagships and the big elders don't necessarily have. And then the moveset's pretty tough, right? So he's got his punch walk where he's slamming the ground over and over again. Got a number of attacks where he like injects his slime mold deep into the ground and it has these subterranean explosions. Some games are larger than others. He can dump like huge piles of slime into one continuous big blob of it to slow you down to try and trap you in, and that blows up. In his more recent incarnations, he's got like the held sprint punch where he'll come dashing at you with the fist raised over his head and he'll go in for the big hook when he can get that opportunity. He's got a lot of really nice repositioning moves where he'll strike the ground and then do those kind of like semicircle hop leaps around you to try and box you in with slime to try and trap you and box you in and hit you into the traps that he just laid if he can't hit you automatically. So he's good at some zone of control. He's got like some just decent like battle intelligence to him. So he tries to box you in, tries to trap you. If he can't hit you just straight up with his punches, he will trap you in his slime. He'll box you in. He will get you one way or the other. He's crafty, and I've generally very much enjoyed his combat mechanic. The most annoying thing about Brachydios is the change that they made to him in Iceborne regarding his slime, because they wanted to pay homage to him being the progenitor of the slime status that was eventually repurposed into Blast, so they made his slime a little bit more deadly, where it'll, instead of like the powdery stuff, it'll cling to you, and I think you need generally 5 rolls to get it off, and you can kind of reset the timer on it by rolling, but otherwise it'll start to like build before it blows up. And generally he's not really trying to get that timer to go off. He's trying to strike you again to get the big combo damage off of the hit itself and the explosion. And it can take quite a bit longer to get that off, so you're just rolling. And that's a little obnoxious. I get why they did it. It's supposed to be kind of homage. It's really supposed to cling into you. You really want blast resistance against Brachydios and Raging Brachydios. That is the most annoying thing about him, for sure. I think he also slowed down a little bit in Iceborne, but he definitely got some new moves that really kind of helped him out. He's a good fighter. He's a smart fighter. He's a crafty fighter. He's definitely seems to be one of the more intelligent of the Brute Wyverns. I like that his slime mold can run out if he kind of overextends himself, so he's got to relick and reprime himself. That factors in with the ecology, which is really fascinating. The fact that you have this creature who has a symbiotic relationship with the spore mold, so he creates the ability for the spore mold to be carried around and to explode so that it can reproduce, but it also serves as a weapon for him. And as a result of that, what you have is a creature who's developed a hide that is so thick and so durable and so dense that it can survive his own explosions, and that gives him incredibly insane offensive and defensive capabilities. So he's really just this enormously effective creature. combat-wise, because he needs that shell to survive his own blasts, but he's also packed with these now just pillars of rock for fists that are laced up in clingy explosives. You know, unless he's punching like really far above his weight, he can win just about any fight he gets into. It's gonna take really an Elder Dragon to take down a Brachy, and even then it's still a fight, because he is locked in offensively, he's locked in defensively, he seems to be a genuinely intelligent combatant. He's a really dangerous animal. He has a ton of stuff that's just working on all cylinders for him. The gears looks great. Weapons across the board have all historically looked very good. It's a very good color scheme with the green and the purple. Those blend really well together, specifically the shades that they chose for him. It's a super simple color scheme, really just 2 colors, and they found the shades that match extremely well with one another. He shifts to a little bit more yellow when he's in rage mode, and that still generally looks good. He's not afraid to be a little sillier than the other flagships. He's got some good tactics to him. He's got some great lore to him, some good gear to him. Also, I think his theme is almost underrated. It's a really good piece of music, and I feel like people didn't pay attention to it quite as much until Raging came out and came with his own remix. But the regular Brachydios theme, it is high speed, it is triumphant, it's really big energy, it's extremely catchy. Brachydios is a super duper good monster. I think I'm gonna put him... He's like right up there with Agnaktor. It's just a lot of moving parts that came together extraordinarily well. Deviljho. We love Deviljho. The legend, dude. The big guy. The old terror from Tri. Anyone who's played Tri, anyone who's started with Tri, has that story of the Qurupeco quest gone wrong. When he calls in that roar that kind of sounds like a mutated Rathian, and then a 2-story, several-ton dinosaur comes crashing into the fight and messing crap up, and any attack he could do to you at that point just massacred you. And he's big, and he's strong, and he's aggressive, and he's pretty fast for his size, and he's massive horizontally, so his attacks are gigantic. Bite attacks and tail attacks and quakes off of his stomps. So big lunges to knock you down and pin you, and he tries to eat you alive. And if you manage to get him angry, that just pulls out the dragon element. He's got this big sweeping lightning dragon smoke beam. He's definitely probably, his first incarnation is the most iconic he was for a very long time because of just the nature of his existence. You know, the nature of his relationship with the Qurupeco and him being just kind of this terror that was stalking parts of higher rank when you were definitely way too undergeared to fight him, and he would pop up every once in a while just to wreak havoc on especially Qurupeco, but then he started to go into like the other fights and whatnot. It was just this persistent danger that eventually you were able to build up to be able to fight, which was an awesome part about him. And the fight was generally just quite good. It's not the best fight the 3rd generation had to offer, but it was good. It banked a lot on its size, obviously. And then, you know, he just kind of became a roster mainstay for the 4th generation. So he sticks around in generations, he sticks around in 4. And, you know, he's still cool to have around. He's got cool gear, he's got a cool fight. He invades a number of quests. But yeah, there's other invaders who picked up on his big mechanic. And, you know, he becomes just like a little bit more, just this good monster to have on the roster. World comes around, and he is the first title update monster. The most unfortunate thing about him is that by that point you probably had some decently augmented gear, and he really wasn't that tough. He was just kind of on par with a lot of the Elder Dragons, and you could beat him down without too much trouble for where he was brought in. He works so much better as a monster who is stalking high rank consistently. I think that is the biggest knock against him in World, is that he really just generally doesn't work as well as a DLC monster. The fact that he was a DLC monster, the first like post-launch title update monster in Monster Hunter, the big strength there is that they gave him a lot of attention. So they upped his moveset a little bit, gave him a couple more physical attacks, they just flushed out the pool a little bit, made him generally a lot more fun to fight. I find him generally very fun to duel with in world. He's still really big, but a lot of moves to deal with. They're these big, strong, slow telegraphs that do a ton of damage if you get hit, but still generally pretty fun to learn. I think the model in and of itself got a lot better. I was never a big fan of like the dead shark eyes that he had in 3rd generation. I think the gold with the black pupil is a much better look for him. Just generally across the board, I think he looks a lot better. The texture on his scar tissue looks a lot better. The defense down acid off his bites is a little bit more prevalent, which is a cool bit of him that he can just up his damage even further. And then, of course, you have his interactions with the other animals. And this really showed off what World could do. And what, like, the promise of something like Wilds can do. And what, your big boss super-powered monsters can do with the lesser monsters on the field, right? Is not only does he have a ton of turf wars where he can body every single apex in the game, so he can rock the crap out of Legiana and Rathalos, and he can go blow for Basilgeuse, and he has one of the coolest turf wars ever, where he just spikes Diablos into the ground, but then, a lot of the smaller monsters, your Odogaron, your Dodo, your Jagras, your Tobis, he just scoops that up in his mouth, and he is using other monsters as a weapon, which is kind of fitting, considering Qurupeco used him as a weapon. And it does a ton of damage, and it's just so imposing to see boss monsters being used as weaponry against you, and he slams them off of trees and bashes them off the ground, and then he's throwing them at you and whatnot, and it's nuts. And it is so tantamount to like what the title update monsters could be, and what they were going for, and what the animal interactions were going for, and what like the strengths of this cohesive no loading zone world was. I think Deviljho was a really good display of like what these games could do, and I think still to this day he has done it better than pretty much any other monster has. His interactivity with the other creatures, he just rolls up and dominates so many other things. We'll talk about Savage and what he can do and how he expands on that in a little bit. In 2 incarnations, Deviljho has proved himself to be just absolutely iconic, very revolutionizing. He is the impetus of the invaders. He's big about the turf wars and interacting with the other animals. We're going to see if stuff like that really starts to pop off in Wilds. It's what it seems to be. No other monsters really emulated that. He's got his dragon, he's got his defense down, he's got pins, he's got quakes, he's got a whole lot of stuff in his arsenal. He's definitely more fun with certain weapons than others. I think counter picking is definitely pretty important for him. He's very learnable, he's very big telegraphed attacks that are very fun to learn. He still stays good in 4th generation, but he has just 2 incarnations of himself that are incredibly important and incredibly iconic, very high personality, extremely memorable, and I think he's gotta be in Wilds. There's no way he's not in that game. When he comes back, it's going to be really cool, man. Just seeing the big lumbering monstrosity out in the distance, traipsing closer towards the fight you got going on, looking for something to kill, rolling up and bashing through, like, have him, like, single-handedly fighting through, like, packs of Doshiguma. Give me a monster who can, like, single-handedly fight the herds, and that's what Deviljho would do. And then, like, the armor is not my favorite, and usually doesn't have skills that I like to rock a ton, but the weapons across the board all look fantastic. Typically low affinity, very high raw, decent dragon, decent sharpness, so definitely usable if you're going for like raw weapons with a little smidge of dragon is typically what you're going for with his gear. And across the board, his weapons all look phenomenal. Your dual blades look good, your bow looks good, your lance is awesome, the greatsword is cool, the longsword is sick. What an icon. At the very least, you're up here. We'll see if Lucent can hold that spot. Then you got Savage. And Savage is cool, man. Savage is really cool. The worst thing about Savage, we'll get the bad thing out of the way, is Iceborne's treatment of variants in general. I got a bit of a chip on the shoulder on how Iceborne handled variants. A lot of them are just replacement monsters for their monster of origin. I'm not a fan of that at all. I completely disagree with that. I was having a talk with a couple of dudes in my Discord a little while ago, but like the variant replacement made variants feel a lot less special and a lot more rudimentary, and just like the master rank version of a lot of those creatures. And that's the worst thing about Savage, is he shows up super often. He used to be an enormously rare monster. I know that in Tri-Ultimate, it could be tough to, like, get quests to actually go out and fight him. He was just this extremely terrifying thing that would just show up out of the blue. It's kind of cool to take a monster that was already enormously terrifying and then just pumping him up there. You know, if the Deviljhos do come back, I think you got to keep standard Deviljho in your master rank, and then Savage has just got to be this rarity. I mean, the way Wilds is panning out is like, oh, there's a Savage out there in the field. Like, either that's gonna up the hunt that we're trying to do, or we gotta go get him because that's rare. And I think kind of like the dynamic quest system that Wild seems to be introducing is going to lend itself to stuff like that very easily. That is easily the worst thing about his legacy so far, is that he becomes rather rudimentary because he's just the replacement and he's an invader, so he's there a lot. So Savage does not feel quite as special in Iceborne as he does in a lot of other games as an invader and as just like this animal out and about. Where he does feel special is combat-wise. His moveset is terrifying if you don't know how to fight it. Built to be, because I know that he is rather flinchable if you really know what you're doing. But if you're only kind of like pretty good at the game, Savage is gonna scare ya, because he's quick. He's got a lot of attacks. He's got a lot of dragon, a lot of output. He's merciless. He's persistent. He barely ever leaves his enraged state. He'll chase you across the map pretty easily. It's super easy to lure him into other fights to get him to fight your own battles for you. And then he does a crap load of damage if that's going on. The other thing that kind of stinks about him in Iceborne is that his like dragon aura looks pretty bad in that game. It's really just kind of like this wispy mist and a little bit of extra glow in the eyes. Even in third generation, his aura didn't look amazing. There's no better looking Savage Deviljho than his official render in third generation and a lot of his artwork. I don't think any of the games have been able to create that kind of chaotic dragon aura that looks quite as good and quite as pronounced. I think they need like a little bit kind of like harsher, the black coloration in there to really kind of get it to pop, because it just looks like a bit of like red dragon coming off of his head. I think they definitely need a little bit more in that department. But he looks sick, dude, with like his face partially blacked out and the lightning coming off of him. But yeah, no, I feel like an in-game version of him is yet to fully live up to that design. The other thing I miss from him from Iceborne is like the stepping around, like rearing up on the back and like doing those big sweeping dragon attacks. I miss that attack, but it's replaced with a lot of cool stuff, like the straightforward big dragon beam, the dragon nuke. I mean, he's a lot of fun. Super oppressive. Counters that with some flinchability, big move pool. Now not only is he beating up other apexes, but he's beam clash turf warring with like Black Veil and Velkhana and Namiel. So he's now properly fighting on par with Elder Dragons, and that feels like a really good escalation of power from the original Deviljho. It's just, you know, should feel a little bit more special. The aura needs a little bit of work on it. The gear definitely looks better because you have a little bit more darker colors and a little bit more red. The armor is definitely a better model than the normal Deviljho. I feel like the regular Deviljho is a little bit easier and a little bit more fun to learn because it is a big telegraphs, big hit. The Savage definitely gets kind of crazy in Iceborne. Definitely still learnable, but not, I'd say, quite as fun because there's just like so much stuff he does. I think just like regular Deviljho feels a little bit more crisp, a little bit more clean, and Savage's definitely lacks kind of some of that level of iconicness, and again, some of his specialness has been eroded a tiny bit. I think making him just like this super duper rare occurrence is something that he definitely needs. I think Wilds is prime time for a game like that, so like a big Deviljho, not even necessarily a comeback, but you know, just make him feel even more special and even more intimidating in Wilds with the way that game seems to be set up. Seems to be prime time. So yeah, no, Savage is good for sure, for damn sure. So he's definitely like right up and around here with his cousin. He definitely has the cooler moves. I think I'm gonna put him maybe like right here. Yeah, because he needs to feel a little special again. He does. He's just master rank Deviljho, and that does do a little bit of damage to him, I think. But his moves are really cool, man. They're really cool. Alrighty, Zinogre. This is an interesting one. So we already had the bottom of the popularity poll. Let's talk the top of the popularity poll. And I'm going to be honest. Zinogre definitely is an expected and kind of boring choice for top of the popularity poll. A lot of people call it overrated. A lot of people call it undeserved. A lot of people act like they don't understand why. But let me tell you, Zinogre deserves that top spot. There are other monsters that also deserve that top spot. Let's not get me wrong. There's probably a shorthand of probably like 10 monsters that could really feasibly hit the top spot in terms of popularity. And Zinogre's one of those 10. He's one of those 10. He's the one that won. Because he does deserve it. Because Zinogre's very good. He's very good. Zinogre is a monster a little bit of ahead of his time with I think he was the first monster to have like the full turn speed rather than the 60-degree angles. He's one of the first big combo orientation monsters. He's one of the first big monsters who has a powered up state that you have to physically knock him out of instead of just waiting for a rage mode to depower. He's a big trendsetter. He's also the first Fanged Wyvern, was the first or an original Fanged Wyvern minus his variations for about 10 years. And now the Fanged Wyverns have evolved into one of the best categories that we have. It's one of the most diverse, it's one of the most creative, and he is the progenitor of it, and there still really aren't any other Fanged Wyverns that look like him, act like him, fight like him, minus, of course, his variations. You have the mixture of a wolf aesthetic with the reptilian aesthetic, with the lightning aesthetic, with like the guitars playing, like the Stegosaurus spines coming up and off of him. He's a very effective blend of a lot of things. The biggest thing knocking against him is his design was so complicated that in low-res, lower poly games, he did not generally look particularly good. His color palette was not great. The blues and the yellow-browns they used for him and the whites did not blend together pretty well, and he had a lot of bits to him that were a bit helter-skelter, didn't lock in especially well. He looked a little disjointed. That's definitely the weakest part about him. And then Iceborne comes in, and the design is completely fixed. Like, completely fixed. That Iceborne Zinogre looks amazing. The color blending is perfect. The shades they picked for the blue and the brown and the white all look great. The bioluminescence is amazing. The proportions on a lot of his spikes and spines and extra bits and whatnot is locked in. The formation and the design of them is a lot better. Iceborne Zinogre is perfectly designed. And then they reverted a lot of stuff in Rise, and the Rise one does not look nearly as good. Doesn't help that, you know, with a lot of the color diminishment in that game and kind of how bland the direction that game could be, it really robbed a lot of like the very just kind of like pure white of the fur. A lot of the bioluminescence is gone. But yeah, no, peak design. Iceborne is peak design, and if he comes back in Wilds, it should probably be the Iceborne model that is used again. It really should be. That is the best one in terms of proportion, in terms of color, in terms of lighting effects, in terms of fur effects, in terms of a lot of things. Like, that is the best Zinogre. I will admit that the colors and the design were very rough and very busy and a little bit ahead of their time. Eventually, Monster Hunter caught up to what Zinogre was trying to do. That's a big thing with him just across the board. Monster Hunter eventually caught up to Zinogre with the turn speeds and the more fluid movement and the combo structures and the more complex combo structures that flowed slightly differently and the powered up states that you gotta knock things out of, and, you know, the Fanged Wyvernness. He was very ahead of his time for a very long time. It made him incredibly unique. I think that's a big strength of him. He was incredibly unique for what he was. Did a lot of things that none of the others did. An evolution of his moveset that a lot of the other classic flagships have not benefited from. And even now that Monster Hunter has caught up to a lot of the choices and the things that he brought with him, he still doesn't feel diluted because he's been evolved on so well. His lore is so good. He's got this shifting roster of moves and is consistently gets new combo structures and new attacks and very cool, like, fun to deal with attacks in pretty much every game. You have like the lightning uppercut in Rise, you have the revolving thunderbugs satellites that he has in Iceborne, you got the big thunder crashes, you have just like the different ways his combos will go from one to another. His paw slams got extended, he'll chain those into his lightning charge sometimes. He's much better about getting his lightning charge off nowadays, creating distance. Yeah, no, and he's really just kind of never been the same thing twice. Diablos kind of gets a little repetitive sometimes. Tigrex, Nargacuga, Rathalos, in some of the incarnations where they didn't really get the help that they needed can feel very samey. Zinogre really just hasn't suffered that because his combos change just about every game, and he gets a new attack in just about every game. So he's always feels pretty fresh. He always comes to the into his games, he never really feels old. He feels lively, he feels fast, he feels like there's something new to learn every time. They've been very very nice to him. He's definitely a teacher's pet. I know, like, he's definitely Ichinose's baby, but, like, the main series team, too, are incredibly nice to him. Iceborne Zinogre is probably the best he's ever been. He is, like, at, like, Elder Dragon level power in Iceborne. And that's partially because, you know, he wasn't originally expected to be on the main roster. He was brought in by fan demand, so they had to bring him in after the story, so they had to power him up to justify that. And they kind of ecologically justified that by the fact that the Thunderbugs have less of a prominent natural predator with the absence of Gargua. They're probably like other insectivores, but that is like their big one, so Zinogre populations are generally much stronger in Iceborne. That's a very cool bit. The Thunderbug lore in and of itself is particularly fascinating. It makes for astounding variations that are incredibly easy to build upon. It's just a cool symbiotic dynamic. You know, he's a very cool predator on his own right, an extremely effective hunter, but now you have these allies with him that will shock his muscles and allow him to perform these feats that most animals would expend way too much energy being able to do. It's part of why he can jump around and leap around and flip and combo so much, is because he has that electricity jolting into his muscles and hypercharging them past what that animal would normally really be able to do. Say he's boring all you want, it's cause you don't appreciate how good he is. You don't appreciate what he brought to the table. You don't appreciate the changes that he brought with him. He is one of the coolest themes ever. The theme in and of itself is this excellent blend of traditional Japanese instruments and metal drums and percussion and guitars and a traditional orchestra, and it blends those three styles of instrumentation together incredibly well for three very good themes across the board. The original is still extremely good. The Rise one, bringing in the vocals, is enormously good. It's the best addition of vocals, I think, barring maybe Mizutsune, that Rise had to offer. The armor's generally very good design. There's better looking armors out there, but it's good. The weapons are usually very good. The longsword's iconic for what it can do. The collapsible greatsword's great. The dual element dual blades are pretty stellar. Call it boring all you want. It's just because you don't like things that are popular. I'm gonna be honest with you. He's a trendsetter in multiple facets. He looks great in Iceborne. His fight has always been very good. It has always evolved. It has always been fresh. Like, let's not kid ourselves. I ain't even a guy who's like, let's go in because popular is popular, right? But sometimes popular is popular for a reason. I mean, look back at the 5th gen tier list I put out. I put like Coral Pookie in S tier. I'll vouch for like the weirdos that do stuff really well when I think it's warranted. Look at the list right now. Top 6 is Qurupeco over Lagiacrus, because he's like that good and does that much stuff and is that interesting. And he's over Laggi, and he's over Glacial Agnaktor, and he's over like Gigginox, and he's over a whole bunch of other stuff. This ain't a thing about people being sheeple. Zinogre's that good. He's that good. Maybe you don't love the fight, and that's personal preference. Maybe you don't love the wolf aesthetic. Maybe you don't love lightning. Okay, fine. But let's not pretend like he's not that good. Let's not kid ourselves. He's incredibly good. Has always been incredibly good. I saw people talking like, oh man, how does Zinogre take first place? Oh, well, wolf. Oh, well, lightning. Oh, well, guitar. It's a lot of stuff. He's a very important monster for a lot of reasons. Lore's great. Gear's great. Combo structure's great. The speed he brought in is really good. The category he introduced is amazing. The music he brought in has 3 great versions to it. But is he better than Lucent? Because Lucent is also that good. We kind of have like a big 5 going on of these guys that I think are just absolute masterworks. Is he better than Lucent? Is he better than Deviljho and Agnaktor? I think I would fight Zinogre over Deviljho. Would I put him over? Definitely not in Sunbreak. That's for damn sure. Nah, dude, Zinogre. Let's leave it there. Now things get tough, because now we're talking Stygian. Holy Stygian's cool. Holy crap, Stygian cool. The worst thing about Stygian Zinogre is that he got overshadowed by Safi Jiva. And sometimes you kind of forget that Stygian was a title update monster. He's in there, but he gets like immediately overturned by the Scout Siege for Safi Jiva. And now he's in that game. He is a title update monster. Man, was he good. Looks amazing. As much as like Iceborne Zinogre fixed the design, again, let's not kid ourselves. The best looking Zinogre is Stygian. The white and the black and the red is amazing, dude. It's so cool. Who gives a if it's edgy. And the arrogant, like, strut walk, I know Zinogre has that too, and he's got, like, dragon hell bolts raining down on him. Stygian is just a cool nomenclature to him. The one thing I wish he still had is that his dragon, like, lightning orbs used to, like, follow you around and track you in, like, 3rd generation and 4th generation and whatnot. That was wicked cool. What they replace it with is still sick, but, I mean, like, give them... I'll take both. I'll take both. That's fine. So they replace it with like these big kind of Dracophage bug lightning sheets that will just strike down in these rows, and you kind of try to like roll through them to get back at him as he does those attacks. Very visually cool, very, very big, but those like tracking dragon orbs, they're a little simpler, but they had like a lot, it was very big personality. It was like a really cool level up of just kind of like the curve shot lightning balls that the original Zinogre has. But the attack's still really sick. For sure. He looks all good, all sparked up and lightning-y. And then, dude, they give him, like, this brand new super attack. It's like this double slam combo, and then, like, the area darkens around him a little bit, and he does, like, M. Bison's Psycho Crusher spin drill move, dude. What the It's... How does he even do that? How does he get his body to move like that? I don't know, man. He's just sick. He's a big lightning hell wolf. He's doing the Psycho Crusher. Big corkscrew drill attack. Oh, dude, it's so tough. And then, you know, you got the black, red, and the white. So, like, all his stuff looks cooler than the yellow, white, and blue. Better than Lucent, though. Better than Lucent. Shit, man. Is he better than Lucent? I don't know. Man. That's damn, man. Damn, dog. It's like, it's a tie, but like, the Stygian vibes are so good. It's so good. What an animal, man. Alright, and then we got Elder Dragons. And Elder Dragons across the board in Tri are a bit different, because we don't have our typical, like, running around the maps type of Elders. We got a lot of big spectacle battles. I'm going to start off with the Mohran's, with Jhen Mohran. Jhen Mohran is pretty damn cool. Massive sand whale lizard with the 2 big tusks going around in the desert, attacking sand ships and whatnot. We gotta go fight him because he's got these rare ores that gather up on his back and crystallize on his back. Let's be honest, the fight ain't nuts. I'll be honest. It's pretty simple. In comparison to like Lao Shanlung and Shen Goren though, it's way better. Like a lot better. And not necessarily because he has a ton of moves. I mean, he has a couple things, but you have, like, the climbability up on his back is, like, a whole thing. That's executed way better than it is with Lao. He's got a couple of moves. He's got his check. He's got, like, his big tusks ramping up onto the boats. He can, like, kick up the rocks and whatnot. That's something. And then, once you get in, like, the final phase, he's got, like, the big body slam, the tusk sweep and everything. Not a lot of moves. What makes the fight fairly fun is just the amount of stuff that you can do on the ship. So, you know, you can climb up onto his back and you can set bombs. You can load up the ballistas and fight the ballistas. You can load up the cannons and fight the cannons. You counter his big attacks with the gongs. You counter his big dive with the Dragonator. There's just a lot of little stuff to do. There's a lot of tasks you can do that make his fight not the most replayable, but fairly replayable. It is fun for a couple of hunts, and then, you know, you scatter it out a little bit, but it's, if you do it like 5-6 times in a row, that's gonna drag. But it's a fun thing to go back to every once in a while, you know what I mean? And the design's pretty damn solid. Simple. It's good. Big, massive, chunky sand whale with the 2 giant tusks. He's got the, kind of like a reptilian mix in there. It's huge. Costs a lot of the fact that he's big. That's for sure. The spectacle does help a lot. He's big, and him being big helps him a lot. Makes him a lot cooler. But, yeah, no, I think... Oh, and, like, it's also really cool. You get knocked off the boat. You get, like, dragged behind the ship with, like, the string, and you have to, like, climb up the string when you're dragging in the sand. That's a cool animation. Just, like, a lot of cool little things in that siege fight that are a lot of fun. And then, the final phase is definitely a little less fun, but you're trying to, like, pepper him with shots from a distance as he gets close to the boat, and you're trying to, like, you have, like, this last defense of the boat before he busts that in, and he can, like, get into lock-lack and stuff like that. That's pretty cool. But, we definitely need more to really be great. It definitely loses its replayability. It's got a couple of good weapons and armor for sure. It's more kind of like samurai-y. That's kind of like, it looks cool in a vacuum, but it doesn't really look like him. That's the biggest drawback of the gear. It's like, it's cool samurai gear, for sure. And it don't look like him. And that's definitely like the worst part about his gear. The fight definitely needs more. I'm very excited about the fact we got sand ships coming back in Wilds, because like, please put a Mohran in the game. And if you're gonna put a Mohran in, have it be Jhen. Like, Daren's fine. I do like Daren. I wouldn't be upset if it's Daren. My buddy Nate would be very upset if it was Daren. But I think, like, Jen's cooler. Because Jhen doesn't try quite as hard. Like, Daren's got, like, the big pointy drill nose thing and, like, the darker colors and everything. And Daren does look cool. But Jhen ain't trying as hard. He just kind of is cool. He's tough. I like him. I like him a lot. Awesome theme, by the way. Especially first phase Jhen Mohran. That, like, the big blaring, booming horns when he comes cresting up over the ship. Oh, that aesthetic is tough as dude. His theme's mad good. That it sells his power and his size and like the kind of like grand sweepingness of the encounter super well. Put him around in Wilds, guys. Put him on like the top of on the verge of greatness. And then Hallowed is, again, we're kind of looking at like this is like a Gen 1 subspecies. I think he's a little bit more aggressive. I think he's got more health. The coolest thing about Hallowed Gen is that he's super like tough to get to. I think you got to beat borderline every other monster in the game to even unlock his quest. And then you exclusively fight him at night, so he's got like the deep dark purple glowing crystals on his back going through the sand at night. It's a cool vibe, it's a cool aesthetic. Feels very kind of like ghosty and whatnot. This would be something that would be kind of cool if he's like a very rare encounter or something like that. It's like, oh crap, like no, there's like a Hallowed Gen out there, like we gotta go get it for sure. That would work, I think. But it's like, I don't think there's really any fight changelings. Maybe it's like a little faster and like the numbers are a bit bigger. So, I mean, I think he's going to go like, there's kind of like a divisive line in somewhat subpar. And I think he's going to go like right over it. It's kind of blocking off still like the good fights that are just kind of with some mediocrity to it to like the actual ones that are kind of annoying. On second thought, these three might go down another one. We'll see how I feel. Ceadeus or Ceadeus. I don't really know. I call him Ceadeus. That's what we're going to call him today. We go from the sand whale to the whale, the final story boss of a Monster Hunter Tri. Again, big monster, helped a lot with the vibes, right? He's this giant, massive, deep ocean god thing that's just looming down in the dark depths. This absolute underwater giant. You gotta chase him down like this watery hallway forever where he barely even bothers with you until he's actually kind of fed up and annoyed and he fights. Very kind of classic evolution on what like Lao did, but now underwater. For the first part, it's very underwater Lao. Thankfully, in the actual like final phase, the combat is fairly interesting. Not the craziest fight, definitely for sure, but he does have a lot of nice big sweeping attacks that cover a lot of his blind spots, so he's not helpless to just be wailed on. He's got his big vertical tail sweep, he's got his bite attack and whatnot, he's got his like big curl and hit, he's got his sweeping water beam. No, the regular one is the vertical water beam that he can kind of box you out with if he's got you at a range. So he can definitely hurt you. He has answers to you beating the snot out of his head, but it's not super duper difficult, but like decent damage, and like you're fighting with underwater mechanics and whatnot. So like it's still, it's cool. It's a decent fight. It is way better than Lao. It is way better than Shen. And he's got more moves than Jhen, which definitely helps him a little bit. The armor and the gear always looked pretty good. I'm not sure why they went with an Anubis design, but it's cool. The design in and of itself is really cool because it is like very big and very huge, but he also just has like this very non-threatening kind of face to him because he's pretty peaceful generally. He's not really trying to bother anybody. He's just trying to shed his horns that are overgrown over his eyes. That's kind of cool. It's like a precursor to Primordial Malzeno. Is like in the actual like canonical story of Tri, you don't slay Ceadeus. You can go back and do it for sure, but all you really do is you cut off one of his horns to help him see, and he just swims off and he doesn't bother you guys anymore. And that's kind of cool. It's very similar to you helping Primordial Malzeno in the end of Sunbreak before, years before that ever came out. But that would be like the first really kind of proper version of like you actually going out there and doing your job to go help life forms rather than killing them for the sake of preserving the environment. So that's a cool little thing about him. Yeah, he definitely has, he's got kind of like a non-threatening face. He's almost kind of goofy looking, kind of cute looking. Mountain of Health. The worst part about him for sure is that you chase him around in the underwater tunnels and like you're trying to like get oxygen bubbles and you're just whacking at him in this hallway for a while, swimming around after him, and he doesn't do anything. And that wastes like a lot of time. And it's due to the fact that wastes a lot of time that he's like a repel quest, so then you may very well need to fight him a second time because he wasted a whole bunch of time during the chase thing, and then you got to go back and actually slay him, and that's a kind of a pain in the ass. So yeah, no, that drags things quite a bit for sure. And the theme song though, Ceadeus has like one of the best music themes in Monster Hunter, period. It's gorgeous. It's not as dramatic as a lot of the other big ones, but it is just genuinely beautiful. It's really good. Both phases too, but the second one is definitely the more famous one, and it has a lot of power backed in with it being particularly beautiful. The vibes of Ceadeus are really good. The gear is pretty good. The fight is far from awful, but definitely it has a layer to it that makes it very sluggish. Fantastic music. I think also on the verge of greatness, and I'm just going to bump it one over Jhen because it's similar, more moves, a little sluggish. Very similar strengths on these two, very similar opinions on these two. Would love to see them come back with some changes and whatnot. And now we have the Goldbeard Ceadeus, Ceadeus, Carl's Jr. Best thing about this guy is that he trims out pretty much all the fat. There's no chase. There's no going down the hallway. There's no two phases where he doesn't even so much as look at you and just kind of bats you aside sometimes. You just go in there and you fight him. It's only the second theme. It's only the battle stage. It's only the underwater ruin. And there's no repel. It's just a straight up 50-minute slay quest. No fat, no bloat, no nothing. And that's definitely appreciated. It gives Goldbeard Ceadeus a leg up over his cousin here. And then, I mean, you know, as we were talking about, the Ceadeus fight is pretty good. Not the best. There's other better big monsters that come later, but for a big underwater boss that needs to cover a whole bunch of angles and is gigantic and kind of slow, it's halfway decent. You know, you still got your big vertical tail attacks, your horn sweeps. This one, I'm pretty sure, has both a vertical and a horizontal water beam sweep. This one also has a pretty rudimentary, as far as like ultimate attacks go, type of move where he will swim up to around like the top of the underwater ruins and he'll fire this massive beam targeted pretty much right at you, just shooting straight down. Very cool spectacle, very cool to see him up there. Only drawback of that attack is it takes him a minute to get up and back down, so that's a teeny bit of a pace killer. Goldbeard Ceadeus is pretty darn good. Definitely kind of challenging because his health pool is bigger and his damage is bigger and all that good stuff. You can get the double horn chop on this one, so you get even more carves off of him. The gold and the black color palette looks great, especially on his armor. It's cool stuff. It's very cool stuff. Yeah, no, just takes like a pretty decent big end boss and makes him a step or two better. Doesn't change too many things, but the new water beams he gets are cool enough. Pretty good. I think he's going to go at the bottom of all-around excellent. I think all of these fights are definitely better. But in trimming all the fat, I do think he gets out of on the verge of greatness. Goes into actual greatness, but definitely towards the lower end of it. Let me bump this guy ahead a little bit so we can cover the black dragons together. But we got Amatsu. Amatsu is super cool. Basically, a Leviathan permanently suspended in the air instead of the water. And whereas Kushala is the master of storms, this is the conjurer of hurricanes. Amatsu is mad cool, from his personality to his lore, to his music, to his atmosphere, to his fight, to especially his remake fight. I'd say like the only thing I don't adore about Amatsu is the armor is not the coolest thing in the world. I get like what the vibe is going for. The weapons all usually look pretty sick because they also have like the fin structure, but they also have like the black and gold chest and everything and some of the horns in there. I don't know. The armor is just not like the coolest thing ever, especially like the headpieces. I've never been a big fan of the helmets. That's kind of the worst thing about them. That's about it. So you'd be forgiven if you look at Amatsu and you like listen to the music and everything and you think it's kind of like this very serene, very regal, very kind of temperate storm dragon that just kind of dwelling up in the mountains. But if you look at the behavior of this creature, and then you look at, just like the surroundings of him and what he's done and what his role in the 2 stories that he's been a part of, Amatsu's a pretty vile creature. He's back to back a really good villain in Monster Hunter. So you have his original appearance in Portable Third, where he takes up residence deep up in the mountains and displaces a massive colony of Zinogre, sends them dispersed out throughout the lands, and has them become a problem. And he's really the epicenter of a whole invasive species of Zinogre, attacking certain parts of the landscape. Then you gotta go and you gotta settle your beef with him. And then you have this story in Sunbreak where he single-handedly annihilated a kingdom, wiped out almost everyone who dwelled there, and then comes back around, threatens to kill certain named characters from Rise's story, and is this massive, massive presence who threatens to be a danger to Komura Village if not handled properly. And you get to ride a Apex Zinogre into battle against him as like a revenge, one species against another. It's kind of cool to have like these 2 species be kind of naturalistic enemies as they vie for very similar territory, but one is obviously so much more powerful than the other. But if you get a Zinogre who is particularly strong, you actually kind of go blow for blow with Amatsu. Just some of the stories built up around this guy, they're simple, but he's just a really good villain, because despite his very kind of regal atmosphere to him and the kind of grandiose, majestic music surrounding him, especially in his first phase, he is a displacer, he is a destroyer, he is a killer. Like, he is a very grand presence wherever he shows up. And then, again, he has kind of a beauty to his design and a regality and a loftiness and almost kind of like an angelic nature to him, with a lot of the white fins and the golden horns and everything. But all you gotta do is just look around him, and the churning red and gray skies and the massive swirling hurricane clouds and the sun completely blotted out against the storms that he manifests, and how the sun then reappears as he is finally stricken down. He is deceptively dark, and I really kind of appreciate that kind of contrast between his moveset and his design and his music compared to his deeds and the atmosphere around him. That's something I really like about Amatsu. I think he's got a very excellently crafted contrast of being this dark storm angel. And then the fight, right? So 3rd generation and generations, Amatsu was definitely pretty good. Definitely pretty good. It was fun to fight. That was the first time I ever fought him. I'd been wanting to fight him since I knew about Portable Third. You finally come around. I finally get the opportunity to fight him in Generations Ultimate. He's a lot of fun. It was very much worth the wait. And the fight was really good back then. Still, to this day, I mean, even with all the changes he's gotten recently, Classic Amatsu is still pretty damn good. The Conjuring Tornadoes that you can knock him out of. He doesn't spam that too much, so it's not too annoying. Even though he levitates up off the ground, you can still pretty much hit him with any weapon. You got your tail sweeps, you got your rushing charges, and then you got his very cool ultimate attack where he'll go up into the air, and he'll fire like the big sweeping beam of water, and then you have like the delayed impact, and then it cuts, and you have these big guys that come up out of the ground and whatnot. Super cinematic big move. Not the craziest thing to try and get around, but just watching it is super, super sick. Yeah, no, so it was always fun to fight. And then obviously he comes back in Sunbreak, and then they're like, all right, we're just going to turn this thing up to max, and we're going to make the coolest storm fight ever. So, he's got like the lightning Beyblades. He's got the storm wind tunnels. He's got the massive cyclones that he summons to knock you up into the air and try and like rush into you that you gotta wire fall away from. He's got like the full ground shock lightning thing that just kind of wipe out anything that breathes, that you gotta like wire zip away from up out of the air before he detonates a whole big thing of lightning around him. He's got just like more stuff with tornadoes. He's got like a full body encompassing thing that you gotta jump over. They are able to really maximize wire bugs in that fight. I feel like that was the fight where they're really like, we're gonna make this tool wicked fun. You're gonna be jumping over cyclones, and you're gonna be jumping around like up in midair, there, and you're gonna be evading these big ground lightning shocks, and you're gonna be zipping through wind tunnels and stuff. Like, they really mastered how to make the wire bug as fun as possible in that particular fight. So that was a perfect boss fight for Rise. Definitely, if they bring Amatsu back, they're gonna have to make a couple of changes or kind of work in some mechanics that will function very similarly, because that was a very Rise fight for sure. And that's why it feels great within it, because it felt like a battle where they really understood the identity of the game that they were building with, and they built a boss battle that just maximized the fun factor of what that game had to offer. So I'd be curious what another Amatsu after this would look like, but to be fair, he's probably not going to be coming back for a while, so that's not even something we have to think about for a little bit. It's probably going to take a minute before we see him again. Probably not forever, but probably a minute. I would be surprised if he turned up in Wilds. I don't think that's going to happen. There's going to be any returning bosses in that game. I think it's probably going to be something out of 4th gen. The sheer spectacle of his fights is amazing. It's almost better than Fatalis in Iceborne on like a spectacle level. In fact, it might honestly be. The only thing is that like the graphics aren't quite on the same fidelity level, so some of like the wind effects look a little cartoony and whatnot, to be perfectly fair. And then they kind of always had like that kind of like paintbrushy type of style with some of the elemental effects, which combined with like the low poly or like the lower graphical fidelity didn't always look great. So, you know, Fatalis looks a little bit cleaner, but the amount of stuff that this dude's throwing around, lightning and rain and water and hurricanes and all that good. Yeah, no, Amatsu is ranking up there in like one of the best spectacle fights that Monster Hunter has ever done, and it really doesn't take away from the fight being actually halfway decent, because they do a good job of balancing out the big, bad elemental moves with a lot of physical attacks for you to counter with and go at against. And again, he doesn't fly too high above the ground, and you can zip into a lot of his moves and get in hits. A lot of his attacks have nice big windups that you can go and hit him while he's trying to do it, and sometimes knock him out of some like the tornado calls and whatnot. So the big spectacle moves don't necessarily compromise on him being just a damn good fight. So yeah, there's a lot of good stuff about Amatsu. Good story presence, great villain, excellent music, cool vibes, awesome battle arenas both times he shows up. When the sun breaks when he dies both times, it's super good. 2 back-to-back very good movesets, with one of them being the best spectacle fights of all time. Pretty cool weapons, adequate armor. So definitely in perfection given form, that's for damn sure. But does he top the list? Let's get him up in here. Is he better? Do I fight him over Stygian and over Lucent? I would say that even though the spectacle fight and the balance is good, there are still a lot of moves that are like the wow, look at me. This is really just a big, beautiful, like super cool attack that I'm doing. And occasionally you're really kind of just sitting out and waiting a big attack with them. Again, the pacing is fine. There really isn't any kind of slog. But if I want to get in there for like the nitty gritty, if I want to go in there to tough it out and just go blow for blow, you know, big battle that's consistently fun start to finish, I still think that Stygian and Lucent might be my go-to over Amatsu, because there is a lot of like stop and look at me moves in Amatsu. Doesn't really kill anything, and they're not bad, and they're not like horrible to deal with, but if I'm getting like into the nitty gritty, I still think that Lucent and Stygian have the superior combat. I still think I would fight Stygian and Lucent a little over Amatsu, but Amatsu's still like top 3 for sure. For now, look at the last guy coming up. So Dire Miralis then. Dire Miralis. This is another one where the vibes and the music and the gear and like the title of Black Dragon do a fair bit of carrying. A fair bit. The fight ain't horrible, but it's big and it's slow, and he doesn't have a ton of attacks, and he relies a lot on like the big meteors coming out of his back, shoulder, pauldrons. He's got a couple of physical attacks for sure. Yeah, he does definitely have attacks he can throw at you while you're in the water that aren't just the big lava pauldrons. But that is a good chunk of what he relies on, because that covers a lot of ground. But he's got like a big fireball that he can shoot directly in front of him. He's got a body slam when he's in the water. he's so massive and so slow that he does have some blind spots where you can kind of just sit there and kick the crap out of him for a little while. He does have like some get off me tools. He's got a slither he can do underwater, and he can fire off his projectiles a whole bunch. He can kind of cover himself with that a little bit. He's definitely got more underwater for sure, because he's got a little bit more mobility in there. And admittedly, it is kind of cool that he's so massive that he's like standing on the bottom of the water zone where you're swimming around still and it's fully around you, but he's still just walking. That's kind of tough. He's got more moves underwater. When he's up out of the water, again, he's got like his volcano stuff. But if he's up on his hind legs, then you're really just like whacking him right in the crotch and waiting for him to do body slams. There's a lot of parts where you're just kind of wailing on him and wailing on him and wailing on him, and then he'll do something that you got to get away from because he's just massive, and the fact that his body is so huge is really the main threat. And you go back and you find that blind spot and you smack him and you smack him and you smack him and you smack him and you smack him. It takes 20 seconds for him to do another move, and sometimes the lava rocks hit right in front of them. Sometimes they kind of don't. So you can just kind of go back to smacking him and smacking him and smacking him. It is definitely kind of war of attrition-y at some points. It's far from the worst fight ever created for Monster Hunter, for sure. But there is a lot of find the blind spot, whack, 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 whack. Oh, he's moving. Get out of the way for a little bit. Big attack. And then you go back in and whack, 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 whack. Sometimes he's in the game that he's in a little big for his own good. It's not atrocious, but then again, if you're fighting something like that big, sometimes it's kind of tough to see what he's doing because you got to get in close. It's definitely much cooler underwater because you have that different field of view and you have that different range of movement. You kind of move along with parts of his body, but when he's up on the ground and you're under him, you're really just looking at his knees and his we're being honest, and that kind of takes away from things a little bit. I'm sure there's definitely some stuff you could do with him, adding in some like elevated siege positions and some like bridges and whatnot that he could attack and try to bite at and whatnot. Having him back underwater would be very helpful for his movement. You could have like really deep water where he's just this absolute massive fire leviathan swimming around and trying to bite at you, and he'd still be kind of slow and kind of tanky, but he'd just have like a little bit more movement to him, still trying to like bite at you and claw at you. And if he's swimming around, he can like aim his big volcano pauldrons at you and try and shoot mortar shots at you that way. There's stuff you could do with this. This is workable, as is its fairly war of attrition-y. Not bad, definitely not bad, but not the most engaging, not the most challenging thing. It's you learn what telegraphs to look out for, you learn what weak points to whack at, and then you beat on him and you beat on him and you beat on him and you beat on him until he goes down. More so than, some other monsters, right? Not the worst, not the best. Then the design is pretty damn cool. Also, a little cartoony. It's neat to have him be a Fatalis, basically. There's speculation that he might be a relative or a mutated Fatalis or something. That's kind of tough. No one's entirely sure. There's a lot of myths surrounding him, that he, the water is red around him as he boils all the sea life around him to death, and the water turned red. That's funky. That's funny. I don't know how viable that actually is. I'm sure that would dilute, because the ocean's pretty massive, but, it's still fun. He's got a cool arena that you fight him in. The music's phenomenal. I think that's probably the best part about him, is his theme is really excellent. It's dark, it's harrowing. It is a remix of Monster Hunter Tri's main theme, which is always really cool. Really nice vocals. He's got this very big sense of doom. Cool ass theme. Pretty damn good looking gear all around. The colors don't match 100%. Yeah, they kind of have some violet and some kind of cream white color to them. I'm not entirely sure why they do that. I feel like they should have just gone with the black, red, and orange, because I don't know why the colors don't really match. It's not bad looking in terms of shape, and the color palette in of itself is fine. It just doesn't necessarily look like him. I feel like it would be due for kind of a color retweak. Yeah, man, cool ass monster for sure. Cool ass monster. There's definitely better big fights. I think almost all of them in 4th and 5th gen are better than Dire, but Dire is definitely a good step in the right direction for massive monster fights, for where he is and where he showed up and what his role in the timeline is. Gogmazios and Dalamadur and Ataka and Geismagorm, they should be better than Dire Miralis, right? Because they're newer. They should learn a lot of those lessons and learn about movement and positioning and actually being able to get a really good move kit in there. But yeah, Dire ain't bad. There is better. He's definitely one that kind of needs a bit of a resurgence. The big problem with that is you definitely want him underwater because he's just so gigantic out of the water that it's not the most engaging thing in the world. It's very kind of difficult to take in the spectacle when you're just looking at his junk. Underwater is definitely where you'd want to put him, and we don't know when we're getting that back, if ever. So that's a bit of an issue for the big guy. So I think he pops in. I think he's definitely more engaging than the Ceadeus is. I think his fight is, especially like the underwater portion with the slam, with the fireball, with the fire projectiles, and the big slithery move and everything. I think he's definitely a bit cooler than the Ceadeus is, but not by a ton. Again, I think it's kind of cool. It's a very Fatality moveset, but because he's so massive, they give you that three-dimensional space to move around in. That's pretty cool. Yeah, he's definitely at his best when he's underwater and when he can actually kind of like fully do the Fatalis moveset. Or at least like the classic Fatalis moveset with a couple of upgrades because, you know, he's got some different fireballs, some different slams and whatnot, but it is very reminiscent. But he's so massive and you have that space that it kind of balances out and makes it kind of fun, though there are still a couple of portions where you're just whacking at him. But when he is like up and moving and swimming around and actually doing stuff, it is pretty cool. So I do think it's a bit more fun than the Ceadeus, but only by like a tick. He's only just like one level above. That's about it. And then we have Alatreon. Alatreon. What do we say about you? There's a lot to say about you, big guy. Your armor looks sick. Your weapons are phenomenal looking. Both of your themes are really cool, but for different reasons. And, you know, I kind of would wish for an orchestration that had both the power of Iceborne, but the nuttiness of Try's version, if I'm being perfectly honest. The design is extremely good. You take the classic Kushala and you amplify it up to this demonic level. The colors are excellent, especially now they've gone to like dark purples and blacks as opposed to the more brown coloration of the original Alatreon. Using the 5 elements is iconic, especially now that water has been integrated, even though the water's the least impactful part of the fight. The strategies that go in and the mechanics are intriguing. Eschaton Judgment is controversial and not for no reason. But let's talk about Eschaton Judgment. The worst part about Eschaton Judgment is that not every weapon in Monster Hunter is particularly well suited to dish out elemental damage. Granted, there is a compensation for this in that weapons with the higher motion values and thus less elemental damage require less element to get through the threshold and shut down Judgment. This is true. And it is also true that you can just build well enough, play well enough, and raw damage through Alatreon. People do that a lot, and it is far from impossible to get that good. But yeah, if you are of a kind of like middling skill level of the game, and you're not running a build that is particularly element heavy, and you're not specialized in a weapon that is particularly fast, you are at a bit of a disadvantage going into Alatreon. It is understandably frustrating. You are going to need to adapt, and you're going to need to make a build, and you're going to need to kind of be coerced into doing something that you might not normally do. And I don't really think that that's a bad thing. You know, a strength of Monster Hunter is that there is no penalty for swapping around your weapons, playing what you want to play, swapping around your skills. The only real penalty is a couple seconds of swapping things around. That's for sure. Freedom is a part of Monster Hunter, but also so is limitation, and so is gimmicks, and so is counter building and strategizing and knowing your opponent and learning weak zones and learning attack telegraphs and learning elemental weaknesses. And Alatreon is the ultimate culmination of that facet of Monster Hunter. It is a facet of Monster Hunter. It is an important one. It is a facet that has dwindled in its importance a little bit in 5th generation, because I find that the monsters in 5th generation usually did not do enough damage to properly punish players who got caught up in gimmicks, and thus incentivizing the use of builds that counter the abilities of certain monsters. And Alatreon comes in, and Lunastra comes in as well. Very, very punishing if you don't strategize. A lot of players weren't used to that, and there was a backlash around that. But I'm going to be honest, I think that is a big part of Monster Hunter. The weirdest thing about Alatreon is that his elemental hit zones aren't great, though I believe this is probably a countermeasure the developers took so that players who really knew what they're doing wouldn't be able to just bum rush the Eschaton shutdown and render that attack more or less null and void effortlessly. I think that is a bit of a counterbalancing technique on their end. It still takes a good amount of time to shut him down. So, do we think that this technique is fair? I'll be honest, from my personal experience, I ran Alatreon with a bunch of friends. We got it down. We were able to get it pretty much down to a science. We were able to do it without failing, without needing a whole bunch of retries. Eventually, I made his light bowgun, I built a set around it, and I soloed Alatreon, I think only on one feint with light bowgun. I do not play light bowgun, and I was able to solo him. So I really don't even think that Eschaton Judgment is that unfair, that unbalanced. Probably my 4th or 5th kill on him was a solo with a weapon that I don't play. And I am also not like super tryhard in general at Monster Hunter, so I'm not like the most adept player in the world. Also, I did not like max out that set with augments. That was pretty much just the light bowgun and just the skills. Maybe an augment somewhere, but it was not a fully maxed out to the highest potential grinded out guiding lance set. It was just me running a normal set of skills with a weapon that I don't run, and I was able to solo him on one feint. So, to be honest, I think it is very doable. The attacks take a bit of learning, but, you know, his telegraphs are particularly easy to learn. He has a very fun kit to learn, and when you learn the kit, you can get that elemental damage off, and you can knock him out. And I gotta tell you, man, dude, the attacks he's got, the barrage of moves. He is one of the most fun fights in Iceborne to learn, from the paw slams, and the tornadoes, and the lightning sheets, and the dragon burst, and the water spraying attack, and the flamethrower, and the ice shots, and the ice stalactites falling out of the sky and whatnot. Like, it feels so oppressive when you start, but then you start to learn it, and you start to learn the timings, and you start to learn the telegraphs and the rolls, and you learn where his limbs and where his head is going to be, so you can actually start to get your damage in. It is a very satisfying kit to learn. It's a very satisfying kit to learn. Takes its time, feels particularly impenetrable, but it's those movesets out there that feel extremely impenetrable, that once you learn where the gaps actually are, and you can really kind of just deconstruct those movesets with your eyes and your timing and just your senses and your knowledge, and you learn just how big some of the gaps actually are, those are some of the best fights. And I think Alatreon has moves like that in spades. It's timing, it's patience, it's knowledge, and then you strike, and then you go in. And once you get that down, you can break the judgment with not a whole crap ton of worry. It's pretty consistent, to be perfectly honest with you. A decent build, and some persistence, and some knowledge. I think Iceborne Alatreon is the absolute pinnacle, the highest level, the greatest degree of Monster Hunter's facet of strategizing, and learning, and counterpicking, and using element and items and skills and all that good stuff to combat an opponent. It has always been a facet of Monster Hunter. It is very important to Monster Hunter. The freedom and the expression and the creativity is too, but that is not what Alatreon requires unless you are exceptionally good at the game. And you can get there, for sure. You can raw damage through the Eschaton Judgments. And if you can, bravo, dude. Like, great for you, honestly. That's amazing. But I think he is the peak of a certain element of the game. And being the peak of that difficult element, that planning, that need to pick a different weapon, that need to go outside your comfort zone, that need to learn, that need to get knowledge, I'm not going to mark him down for Eschaton Judgment. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. If you have to pick a weapon for the matchup that you don't know, then that just means you have to learn a different weapon. If you're going to main the same one over and over and over again, then there's a number of matchups in these games that are not going to be fun for you. I think the moveset's excellent. I think Eschaton Judgment, once you learn it, and once you have a good set, and once you're really gunning for it, and once you're locked in, and once you're in your comfort zone, Eschaton Judgment goes from this very punishing thing that feels annoying and feels like it is trying to strong-arm you into doing something, into this incredibly fun technique that is just this race against the clock. It's intense. And then Once you've learned it, once you've gotten it down, virtually every single time you're able to shut down Judgment, before you get, like, to that level of proficiency where you're exceptionally good at the game, it's satisfying every time. And then every horn break, it is this massive wave of relief. There is nothing quite like getting the Eschaton Downs and the horn breaks on Alatreon. That is just these, oh, thank God, all right, we got it, all right, we can rest, we can relax, keep the damage up, keep the damage up, keep the damage up, we just got to get through this, but, like, we're good, we're locked in, and just that weight falls off your shoulders, and you know that, like, you just reset the countdown timer, you're gonna live on to the next stock, like, you're gonna keep pushing through. Nothing really beats that satisfaction, because that version of Alatreon is tough, because that attack is scary, but because it's doable. You can get through it every time. I know, I did. The life that I lost to Alatreon, it wasn't to the Judgment. I shut down Judgment every time. It was just being barraged by other attacks and getting wombo comboed. That's what got me on that life. No, man, dude, I think it is the apex of a certain facet of Monster Hunter, and because of where Alatreon sits in the power hierarchy, I don't think it is unfitting that he is at that apex, at that difficulty level, requires that level of knowledge. You gotta earn that. And then once you get through it, man, the fight's amazing. And it gets faster as he goes, too. You get, like, the timings down, but then the timings start getting faster. And then the pace just ramps, and it's dodge, hit, dodge, hit, dodge, hit. It goes in and out and in and out. Sheets of lightning, fire breath, lightning blast, ice drop, dragon shocks, water spurts, with the water lighting on fire. It's just, it goes, and it goes, and it goes, and it goes, and it ramps, and it ramps, and it ramps. And it's bonkers, but it's just the perfect amount of speed where once you, again, when you lock in, when you learn it, when you got the dance, it feels amazing because it is this constant pulse pounding movement after movement after movement after movement after movement after movement after movement. Go, 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 go. And dude, it's just, you lock in and it feels amazing when that happens, man. It really does. Once you learn it, once you're locked, it's so fun. It's so fun, and you learn where the gaps are, and you learn where you get the hits in. And I think it's mostly like the forelimbs. You want the forelimbs before Judgment, and then you gotta wail on those horns before the defunct Judgment goes and the element swaps to lock out the element swapping. Yeah, man. Yeah, dude, it's so good. It's really, really good, man. Once I learned it, once I prepped, once I built, once I had the knowledge, nothing topped it. I think Alatreon is a little bit more fun than Fatalis. I'm gonna be honest. Fatalis is super duper high tier for a lot of other reasons, for the spectacle, for the power, for the fear, for the mythology of him, for the fact that his gear is way better than Alatreon's garbage armor skill. But I think the actual learning of the moveset I found was more fun in Alatreon. I love that moveset. I love that kit. And I've been talking almost exclusively about the Iceborne Alatreon. Classic Alatreon's really fun too. He's substantially more simple. Really only has like a couple of elemental attacks per phase. But it's still fun. It's still big electrical shocks and ice breath and ice crystals and fire tornadoes and like dragon-infused paw slams and charges and whatnot. He goes from the flying form in ice to generally like fire on the ground. Classic Alatreon's still really good. I think Classic Alatreon would still be S tier. He'd fall behind. He'd be a little bit more towards the middle, but like Iceborne Alatreon, man, dude, he's so fun. Once you're locked, once you learn, once you kind of surrender that aspect of wanting to like, I want to run anything. Once you like play by his rules and you lock into his rules and you learn his game, I think he's probably the most fun fight in Iceborne. For me, at the very least. I think he's at the top. I think he is that good. So let's reassess, right? Let's go top to bottom now, or bottom to top, rather, now that everything's on the board. So, little reassessment. Baleful Gigginox, Steel Uragaan, and Purple Ludroth. Do they stay in somewhat subpar, or do they go in shocked if anything's this low? Do they go to the bottom tier? Steel Uragaan is really just a palette swap with a new status on it, barely anything. The big problem is Baleful and Purple Ludroth take away very important and high personality animal aspects of their core species. Purple Ludroth stays over Steel Uragaan because Ludroth is a better fight than Uragaan. Do they stay where they are, or do they move down? I think that to put them in F tier, they would be in F tier for the sake of creating an F tier. Because really, I don't think any of these fights are offensively bad, oppressively annoying. They detract from certain things. They're a little lame. I think Baleful is probably one of the most pointless subspecies ever made because of Kezu existing. But that doesn't mean Baleful is horrendous. He's just not good. But I don't think that's bottom tier, because Gigginox in and of himself still does have a good moveset, and he does have dynamic part breaks, and the colors aren't bad. He's just kind of irrelevant. Like, I don't think he's ever going to come back. But does that mean he goes way to the bottom? I don't think so, because in the appearances that he does have, he's like, I think he's like the worst third generation monster, but do I think he's trash? Not really. He still has fun moves to deal with, so that's fine. And then I don't think anything's worse than Baleful. Stench, I think, is a perfectly fine debuff. It's somewhat annoying, but I don't think it's worse than Paralysis. Paralysis is worse than that. To be fair, Baleful changes more than Steel, but it also makes some downgrades, whereas Steel is just really just a straight side grade with a more interesting debuff on it and a probably neater color palette. So I don't think Steel goes any lower. Ludroth, I think, is a more fun fight than Baleful. Regular Gigginox, I think, is better than Royal, but like the Paralysis knocks that down, so I think Purple still stays over Baleful. He's just really kind of whatever. He does have a couple of brand new physical attacks that are interesting, but he takes away from some of the interesting thing of Ludroth and isolates him, makes him less of a pack animal, and I do think the colors are inferior. But again, he's built off of Ludroth, so that's a perfectly fine mid-level monster, so I don't think he goes any lower. He's a better fight than Uragaan, and he detracts less than Baleful, so I think he can stay over those two. Hallowed Jhen is really cool design-wise. Barely changes anything in the fight. The fact that he's kind of like this rare mythic monster is interesting, but that's the bulk of what makes him interesting. I think I can slide him up over Baggi, though. So I think I can put Hallowed Jhen over Great Baggi. Because Great Baggi does make a move change with the Sleep Spit, but whatever. I think Jhen Mohran is cooler than, like, the Jaggis are. Like, fighting the big, ghostly, crystal whale out in the middle of the night on a sand boat, that's a cool vibe. It is a cool vibe. And Great Baggi is perfectly inoffensive. There's definitely a line between Great Baggi and the three subspecies at the bottom. That's really, it's not even that I think they belong in a tier lower. It's just, well, maybe they kind of do. But I don't think they belong in bottom tier. I just don't think any of them are that bad. But there is a line of division, you know. What we're gonna do, let's do this. We're gonna change this to actually bad. And none of them are actually bad, but we're gonna have turbo mid as subspecies right here. Because there is a dividing line. I think there's a line, then there's Great Baggi, then there's these three. And then there's like actually bad, and I don't think any of these are actually offensively, I never want to fight them bad. Then Duramboros. He's really only as high as he is because he has an event quest where he's big. That's it. That's what gets him over. But it helps because that event quest's funny. It is part of him. It's the most memorable thing about him. And at least he's better than these three. Because he's not annoying. He doesn't add anything annoying. He's just pink and huge and lives out in the desert. And you know what? That's not much, but it's better than what these three added. Then you got Green Nargacuga. I think Nargacuga is a better base than Duramboros and also is rather important to the developmental history of the creature, so I think he's fine there. Lagombi over Green Nargacuga. Lagombi's got good personality. He's got a funny grab bag of moves. They're not always super fun to deal with. It's not gear that I vibe with at all. I think he's the least interesting of the three bears. I think he's the least fun of the three bears. He's definitely not anything horrible, but it's definitely like Lagombi. So I'm fine with somewhat subpar. Over Green Narga, though, because he's still a Nargacuga. Lagombi does have funny snowballs and goofy. He's a big goofy bunny. I'm going to bump him down one. I'm going to put Green Nargacuga at the top of somewhat subpar. On the verge of greatness, we talked about Uragaan. Uragaan, I think, he needs some work. I think his rock bomb needs to be a little bit more threatening. I think he needs to throw them further. He does have cool cohesiveness with his abilities. You know, the chin slam, into the rock explosion, out of the wheel attack, the lighting himself on fire with the wheel. There is cool cohesion with his gimmicks. Maybe a couple more physical attacks because there's a lot of rolling and a lot of chins and a lot of bombs. He does have like a very big like mix and match of the same strategy that he likes to use, and maybe do for like a couple more attacks, make him a little less tanky, or, you know, just you, like I was saying with Alatreon, use your knowledge and fight him with gunner weapons. I know not everyone likes gunner, but if that's the best way to roll, that's the best way to roll. You can melt him that way. That is viable. Decent design, big brass juggernaut. He's got the scoots coming out of his back, roll around in the half pipe. Neat personality. Couple moves that I like dealing with, couple that I don't. I think Uragaan is about it. I think Uragaan's about as 5 out of 10 as you get for me. Bottom of On the Verge of Greatness, because, you know, I think you can, there's cool stuff in Uragaan. I think you can really kind of pull it. I'll be more of an Uragaan defender than I think a lot of people are. Background number fixes and a couple of moveset improvements, and you have a decent monster. I don't think you're ever going to make Uragaan super duper top tier, but I think you can make Uragaan quite good. As we've discovered in the exotic Uragaan from Explore, you can make his moveset more interesting for sure. Uragaan is far from an unsalvageable monster, and what he has, there's good stuff in there, and there's definitely bad stuff in there. He's a very balanced out monster with about as much good as there is bad. Maybe a little more bad, but not by much. I think he's valid in tier 3 on the Verge of Greatness, because I think you can make him pretty great. Arzuros, fun personality, goofy bag of moves, honey ceiling is fun, design's fun, couple of weapons that look kind of cool. Very inoffensive, middle of the road, 3rd tier monster. Definitely over Uragaan. Great Jaggi over Arzuros. Yes, I agree with that. Volvidon over Great Jaggi. Yes, I agree with that. I think unlike Uragaan, like I said, he's got a lot of stuff. A good amount of it flows together. Doesn't have an absolute mountain of health. I find some of the moves fun to deal with and not particularly obnoxious to deal with. Fun design, kind of good mix of goofy and cool mixed in. Cool looking gear. I'm definitely more of a Volvidon fan than I think most people are. I don't think he's particularly obnoxious. And, you know, his rolling and repositioning is less time consuming than Uragaan. His gas attacks are easier to avoid than Uragaan. So he does a lot of what Uragaan does, but in a far less obnoxious capacity. I think I want to put him over Jade Barroth. His Jade Barroth is neat. His reason for existing has kind of been eroded a little bit, but that doesn't mean he's bad for his own sake within his own title. The U-turn charge is the coolest thing about him, but that's also the biggest thing about him. The color palette's really good. I don't like the exaggerated crest all that much. He's good. I think Volvidon's a little bit more fun, a little bit more interesting. And, yeah, no, they need to find a way to really kind of justify Jade Barroth coming back. I'd love to see him come back. I think he's fine. I do think Volvidon's a bit better. Wroggi over Volvidon. Wroggi over Volvidon. Yes, Wroggi's got a cool dynamic break. His armor his armored weapons look way cooler than they have any right to be on a monster that low level. We like dynamic part breaks, which he has. I like how different he is compared to a lot of his raptor brethren. Very frog-like, very amphibian, super different in terms of body shape and structure. The moveset is a little bit tuned up from the other raptor brothers that he has. He's a good monster. Sand Barioth over Wroggi. Sand Barioth, there's a good monster. There's definitely a good subspecies in there. I think I'm gonna bump him one back, actually. I think Wroggi is a bit more interesting to me personally. I might bump him back under Volvidon as well, if I'm being perfectly honest. Because he does have one really cool gimmick with the Dust Devils off the Cyclone Breath. Really kind of does 2 things with them. The coolest thing about him is that he can go at that big spinning leap off of the Dust Devil whenever he wants instead of automatically, so it kind of keeps you guessing. I do think that's interesting. Those really are the 2 biggest things about him. His color palette is not good, but with the proper blending, I think it can look great. I do think he brings more new to the table than Jade Barroth does. Though I think Jade Barroth has the initially cooler design, but I think Sand Barioth has the potentially cooler design. So I think they're very locked in together. Do I like the Cyclone spin more than I like the U-turn charge? And I think I do. So that's fine. Barroth over Wroggi. Yes, Barioth has the cooler moveset, has a lot of importance. I think Barioth is a very high personality monster, brings a lot of benefit to Monster Hunter in a lot of different facets. The mud mechanic used to be a lot of fun. Still kind of interesting now. It deals a lot with area denial. The Sunbreak version brings a couple of new moves to the table that make that even better. That's fine. Gobul over Barioth. Sure, his grab bag is more interesting. Jhen Mohran is over Gobul. Jhen Mohran, the grab bag of moves is definitely interesting. The vibes of Jhen Mohran, though, are extremely good. Ceadeus over that, though. Yes, I think he's more consistently fun. I think they're all fine on the tier that they're on. I think, if I'm being perfectly honest, I'm gonna bump Dire Miralis down here. Because looking back at that fight again and really thinking about it, Dire Miralis has heights that are more fun and more engaging and more interesting and more appealing than the Ceadeus's, but he also has a lot of sections where it's very methodical, very tedious, just kind of cracking at him, and the bits where his fights are particularly interesting is rather inconsistent, but regular Ceadeus is also inconsistent because of the pursuit aspect and the repel aspect. So I think just because of consistency of fun, even though it doesn't reach the same heights, I think I'm going to put Goldbeard over Dire Miralis, and I'm going to knock Dire Miralis down a tier, because I think, honestly, he was really getting ahead on Black Dragon aesthetics and Black Dragon vibes, and I think you can coast on that somewhat, but not completely. The theme and the vibes are definitely really immaculate, so I do think he stays at the top of On the Verge of Greatness. Duramboros is more fun than Ceadeus, that's for sure. He does have a glaring weakness, so he's fine over that. Still an all-around excellent. I still think very high personality, great design, good for brute wyverns to have a big herbivore, very imposing presence, would love to see him again. Cool that his biggest strength is also his greatest weakness, but that can trivialize him a little bit, and I do wish a little bit better for him. Nibelsnarf over Duramboros, sure, I agree with that. High personality, really cool weirdo design, takes Gobul and makes it more fun and more threatening for sure. Replaces Cephadrome pretty much entirely if you really wanted him to. The eating bombs in the sand is cool. The uvula break is very unique. The design is particularly unique. The sand dune hiding would be really cool in a game with just better graphical fidelity, really good for like ambush predator and whatnot. He's a lot of fun. I think Royal Ludroth is a step up over that in terms of fun factor. Ivory more so than that. Gigginox, sure. Do we want to keep Crimson Qurupeco in perfection given form? Yes, I think you do. I think you do, because he does bring a lot of brand new stuff to the table with Qurupeco. That's very fitting of a very powerful subspecies. Adds a lot of danger factor to it. I do think the lightning is lamer, though. I don't like the colors as much, and he should have the blue throat sack. I don't know why that's not even visible, or it's red in game. That's kind of weird. And yeah, no, the lightning is less interesting than the fire, so there is stuff that knocks him down, but he does a lot of interesting things that evolve on Qurupeco. Very similar concept with Glacial Agnaktor. They're definitely better. Agnaktor is better than Quuru. Abyssal Lagiacrus. Immaculate design. Great looking gear, amazing colors, cool that he's gigantic. You find him deep down in the bottom of the ocean. Really just kind of an expansion on the electrical moves, and he adds the cyclones. So it builds up on Lagiacrus, but doesn't add a whole lot. I think a lot of the other rare species have taken things further, though. But for the time of where rare species were, I think he was still made some pretty interesting changes. Definitely the best design of the three Laggies. And the underwater fight is the best part of him, I think. The regular Laggi has the build-up, the rivalry, the story, the flagship material. He's a very cool rival for Rathalos. Great theme, good gear, very iconic position in Monster Hunter, has a solid position as the Lord of the Seas. The fight underwater is the better part of the fights, but being able to go on land, I think, makes him a little bit more of a complete package. I don't think he's fully mastered just yet, but he is quite good in both forms. Like, he's fine over Abyssal, because I think Abyssal could bring more to the plate, and just because he can't go on land, he does have part of the personality in Lucent and the animal aspect removed, and feels a lot more big boss-like. Barioth over Laggi for sure. Qurupeco over Barioth. Yes, no, I think I'm fine with that. I think he just brings... For where he is position-wise, Qurupeco does a lot of fun stuff, gels his abilities together very interestingly. One of the most unique monsters ever made. Brute's a ton of fun. Savage over Brute, that's fine. Brachy over Savage, that's fine. Agnaktor over Brachy, that's fine. Deviljho over Agnaktor, yes. Zinogre over Deviljho, yes. Amatsu over Zinogre, yes. Amatsu under Lucent and Stygian, yes. Those two under Alatreon, yes. Okay, cool. So we got it. So this is my tier list of the 3rd generation monsters of Monster Hunter. Not a half bad roster, man. Nothing that I think is bottom tier. I don't think any of it's bottom tier. There's some mid as hell that's almost all subspecies, and they're built on frameworks that are already pretty decent, for the most part. So, I don't think there's anything in 3rd generation that's actually bad. None of them. I don't think any of them are genuinely bad. That top lane, man, perfection given form, that's loaded with some of the best of the best of the best, dude. Alatreon, Stygian, Lucent, Amatsu, Zinogre, Deviljho, Agnaktor, Brachy, Savage, Brute, the Qurupeco's, Barioth, 2 of the Laggis, Glacial, Crimson. Some of the best of the best is in 3rd generation, for sure. Great designs, great mechanics, little details, big details, fantastic movesets, some excellent challenges, some brilliant moment-to-moment gameplay, some cool-looking armor sets, some dope-ass music, and even a lot of the stuff that falls outside of perfection given form brings a lot of great stuff to the table. Historically for Monster Hunter, mechanically, design-wise, fight-wise, gear-wise, what a great era. Not that there's been a bad one, but this is an especially good one. I think I'm locked in with this list. So, hope you enjoyed watching. Thank you for tuning in. But, as for now, this has been CR Volcanic or Connor. I shall see ya around. Goodbye. Shout out to all the patrons, and special shout out to Nihilist Chimerax, Datboy Doin Ding, Sir Newt Newt, Peaberry, Stefan Colneen, Shaggy Grizzly, Psychotic Jester, Pecco Plush, Daniel Delasarte, and Call Sign Shadow. Thank you very much, everyone.